With a population of just under 14,000, New Franklin is a small town located in Ohio. It's known for Edgewater State Park and the historic Tudor House. The town boasts stunning views, offering its residents a peaceful, rural experience paired with a relatively affordable cost of living. The people of New Franklin are famous for their friendliness, which gives the town its unique charm. It's also recognized as being 61% safer than other U.S. cities, frequently ranking among the top 100 safest cities in the country. That's why the tragic death of Ashley Biggs shook the community so deeply. Ashley Biggs was born on January 9, 1987, in New Franklin, Ohio. She was an only child, raised by her mother, Kimberly Biggs, and her stepfather. Those who knew Ashley described her as a kind, gentle soul, always smiling and full of joy. She was surrounded by a loving family, and at the age of 17, she met Chad Cobb, a 25-year-old man, during a double date at a local skating rink. They fell in love and began a serious relationship, eventually moving in together. A year later, they welcomed a daughter. However, the relationship between Ashley and Chad began to deteriorate. Friends claimed that Chad was abusive, often hitting her. Shortly after their breakup in 2008, Ashley enlisted in the U.S. Army, giving Chad full custody of their daughter. Unfortunately, Ashley was medically discharged due to her severe asthma and returned home to work as a pizza delivery driver for Domino's in Akron, Ohio. She had also started a new relationship with a woman named Brittany Dunson, and they planned to raise her daughter together. After a lengthy legal battle, Ashley was awarded full custody of her daughter, which angered Chad. He began threatening Ashley and Brittany, leading Ashley to obtain a restraining order against him. On the night of June 20th, 2012, around 11:42 p.m., a late pizza order came into the Domino's branch in Akron. The caller, identifying herself as Jenny, ordered a half pepperoni, half mushroom pizza. Ashley, working that night, decided to make the delivery. The address was located in a commercial area of New Franklin, and she was instructed to deliver the pizza at the back of the building. Ashley left just before midnight, and the staff expected her back within minutes, as the delivery was nearby and the streets were quiet. However, over an hour passed with no sign of her return. Concerned, her manager called Brittany, who hadn't heard from Ashley either. The manager then contacted the New Franklin police to report Ashley missing. Officers arrived at Domino's around 1 a.m. to gather information. Just as they were speaking with the staff, Brittany arrived, visibly worried. She informed the officers about Ashley's troubled past with her ex, Chad. Police assured her that they would search for Ashley and headed to the delivery address on a dark and secluded area. The business there was clearly closed, but in the parking lot they discovered a large pool of blood and scattered coins. It was no longer just a missing person case. Investigators believed that Ashley had been lured to the parking lot and ambushed, possibly by someone familiar with her schedule. They immediately began questioning Brittany, who revealed the intense custody battle between Ashley and Chad and the restraining order Ashley had recently filed. Brittany was certain that Chad needed to be questioned. Police checked their records and discovered Chad's history of violence against Ashley, including an assault charge from 7 years earlier. Early in the morning on June 21st, investigators arrived at Chad's house but received no response. However, a background check revealed that he owned a black SUV, registered to an address about half a mile from the delivery site. Officers went to the new address, which belonged to Chad's grandparents. There, they found a black vehicle parked behind the property. When they approached the vehicle, they found a woman and 4 children inside. It was Chad's new wife, Erica. She was taken into custody, and the children were handed over to family members. As officers searched the property, they heard noises coming from a wooded area behind the barn. A search team ventured into the darkness and soon found Chad hiding in the woods, wearing camouflage. His clothes were stained with blood. Chad and Erica both refused to cooperate, but police were now certain something horrific had occurred. A search of the surrounding woods turned up a backpack containing a large knife, a neoprene mask, gloves, a taser, duct tape, and industrial zip ties, all near the area where Chad had been hiding. Blood traces were found on several of the items, deepening the suspicion of a brutal attack. It seemed like a dead end for the investigators, but they were on the verge of a breakthrough. After this discovery, they used helicopters and dive teams to search for any trace of Ashley or her vehicle. Despite their efforts, it seemed they had hit a roadblock until they received a call from a woman in a neighboring county. The anonymous caller mentioned that her house, situated on a hill, overlooked a cornfield. She had woken up and noticed something shiny near the edge of the field. Fearing that something suspicious was happening, she contacted the police. When investigators arrived at the scene, they found an SUV. It matched the description of Ashley Biggs' vehicle. As they inspected the interior, they discovered the body of a woman lying in the back seat. The scene was horrific. The victim had been bound at the wrists and ankles with industrial zip ties, and another zip tie was fastened around her neck. Her face had turned purple from lack of oxygen, and several taser wires were still embedded in her skin. She appeared to have been severely beaten as well. The woman was still wearing a pizza delivery uniform. Inside the car, there was an insulated pizza delivery bag and the untouched pizza from Ashley's last order. Investigators also found stickers from the deliveries made that night attached to the steering wheel. The body was removed and taken to the county coroner's office for proper identification. Investigators called Ashley's mother and asked if her daughter had any identifying tattoos. Kimberly confirmed that Ashley had 2 stars on the back of each arm and a tattoo on her navel. It was enough to verify that the body was indeed Ashley Biggs. Chad was arrested under suspicion of murder and refused to cooperate with investigators. He was taken into custody at the county jail. Erica, Chad's new wife, was allowed to return home as there was no direct evidence linking her to Ashley's death at the time. On June 22, 2012, the chief medical examiner performed Ashley's autopsy. She determined that the cause of death was asphyxiation from the zip tie around her neck. The victim also showed signs of blunt force trauma to the scalp, face, and body, along with defensive wounds on her wrists and hands. Blood samples from Ashley were compared to the stains found on Chad's clothing and tools. It was a match. Following Chad's arrest, Ashley's family and friends opened up to investigators about the years of abuse she had endured. Brittany, Ashley's partner, revealed that Chad had started stalking and harassing both women after Ashley was awarded full custody of their daughter. He had threatened them with violence, enraged by the loss of custody and Ashley's new life. On June 24, 2012, Chad was formally charged and arrested for murder. His bail was set at $1.5 million. During his hearing, Chad was informed that he would face the death penalty. However, he later accepted a plea deal on multiple charges, including aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, and kidnapping. On February 26, 2013, Chad pled guilty to all charges and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although the case seemed closed, one detail lingered in investigators' minds. A woman had placed the pizza order. They suspected Chad needed help transporting the vehicle to the cornfield, and their suspicions pointed toward Erica. However, there was no concrete evidence linking her to the crime at that time. During the initial investigation, officers had made an interesting discovery. They found a receipt from a local store for the purchase of a prepaid phone on June 20th, 2012. Surveillance footage showed Chad, Erica, and their children leaving the store. Still, this wasn't enough to prove Erica's involvement in the murder. Erica moved on with her life after Chad's arrest. She filed for divorce and began a relationship with Chad's childhood friend, Christopher Michael Stefanko. Erica and Mike married and had a baby shortly after Chad's sentencing. However, Chad wasn't pleased with the changes around him, particularly Erica's new life. Though Erica initially brought the children to visit Chad in prison, those visits dwindled as her new marriage progressed, and eventually they stopped altogether. Around this time, Ashley's daughter began writing letters to her father in prison. In her letters, she described the emotional, physical, and mental abuse she was enduring at the hands of Erica. She spoke of how unhappy she was living with her stepmother in the new family. Chad, growing more frustrated, finally decided to tell the truth after 4 years in prison. In an unexpected move, he wrote a letter to the police. In it, he confessed that it was Erica who made the pizza order under the alias Jenny and revealed that Erica had masterminded the plot. He also told the police that his mother had evidence that could help the case. This was the break the detectives had been waiting for. They contacted Chad's mother, who agreed to meet with them on January 2, 2018, nearly 6 years after Ashley's murder. She handed over a recording of a conversation she had with Erica 2 years after the murder, in March 2014. In the recording, Erica openly discussed the killing and admitted that she was not forced by Chad to lure Ashley with the fake pizza order. When asked why she recorded the conversation, she said it was as insurance for her son, Chad. The investigators realized that Erica had not only made an enemy out of Chad, but also his mother, as Erica had started keeping Chad's children away from their grandmother, which had created tension between them. Piecing everything together, investigators concluded the following events led to Ashley Biggs's murder. After losing custody of his daughter, Chad became increasingly resentful of Ashley and her new lifestyle. He and Erica conspired to lure Ashley into a trap to silence her. Erica made the call to Domino's on that fateful night, knowing Ashley was on delivery duty. She provided an address in a quiet part of town with little traffic at that hour. Erica then drove herself, the children, and Chad to the location to wait for Ashley. As Ashley arrived at the back of the building where she was instructed to meet the caller, Chad ambushed her with a taser, leaving her defenseless. He tied her hands and feet before viciously beating her into unconsciousness. After the brutal assault, he strangled her with a zip tie. Chad then dragged Ashley back to her car and had Erica and the children follow him to the cornfield where they abandoned her vehicle. Erica later drove Chad back to his grandparents' house, where police would eventually find him. Now armed with Chad's confession, investigators prepared to build a case against Erica. However, it would prove difficult because the man accusing her was her resentful ex-husband, who had already taken the blame for the murder. Yet, in the recording, Erica admitted to being involved in the killing and even assisting in it. On November 11, 2019, Erica was arrested and charged with aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, and kidnapping. The prosecution faced an uphill battle as they worked to build a strong case against her. They focused on complicity law, arguing that without Erica's help, Chad wouldn't have been able to carry out the murder. This legal strategy ensured that both Erica and Chad would be held accountable for Ashley's murder, regardless of their respective roles. The prosecution also relied on character witness testimonies from individuals who knew about the conflict between Ashley, Chad, and Erica. A year after Erica's arrest, she was put on trial for her involvement in Ashley Biggs' murder. During opening statements, the prosecution argued that Erica was a key player in the crime and that, without her, it wouldn't have happened. They reminded the jury that under the law, anyone who aids, abets, encourages, or associates with another in committing a crime is just as guilty as the principal offender. In contrast, the defense focused on Chad, claiming that he was using this as a way to reduce his own sentence and secure an early release date. They painted him as someone who, after 8 years, suddenly decided to implicate Erica for his own benefit. Chad testified remotely about Erica's role in the murder, claiming for the first time that Erica was the one who strangled Ashley. His daughter was also called to the stand, testifying about her relationship with Erica and the abuse she endured. She recounted both good and bad memories with Erica, describing psychological and physical mistreatment, including an incident where Erica forced her to eat dog food. After hearing all the testimony and closing arguments, the jury deliberated for 3 days. On November 25, 2020, they returned to court and found Erica guilty of aggravated murder, though she was acquitted of the aggravated robbery and kidnapping charges. In July 2021, Erica was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. After her sentencing, Erica addressed Ashley's familia, saying she would gladly accept any blame if it brought them peace. In July 2022, Erica's conviction was overturned after the Court of Appeals ruled that her rights had been violated due to Chad's remote testimony, which was conducted because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Chad had testified from a separate courtroom, which the court deemed a violation of Erica's constitutional right to a fair trial. A new trial date has yet to be set. In December 2022, Erica requested a reduction in her bail while awaiting a new trial. Prosecutors argued that Erica posed a significant flight risk, given her previous conviction for aggravated murder. The judge upheld Erica's original $2 million bail, and she remains in jail awaiting her new trial. Chad and Erica's children are left grappling with the cruelty of their parents' actions, knowing that their decisions destroyed countless lives around them. They, like their half-sister, now grow up without the guidance of either parent. Maria Fernanda Sanchez, also affectionately known as Mafi, was born in the late 1990s in the warm state of Querétaro, Mexico. She was the daughter of Javier Sanchez and Carolina Castaneda, who quickly realized that she would be a source of joy and vitality in their lives. Mafi stood out from an early age, exhibiting an extroverted personality that paired well with her passion for travel, allowing her to easily make new acquaintances. She also had a deep love for music, which added a charming touch to her character. Over time, Mafi discovered the magic of yoga, a discipline that she believed helped connect her with her inner self, bringing her peace that was visible in her appearance and her ever-present genuine smile. Her thirst for knowledge led her to seek out new experiences and embrace every opportunity to learn. Mafi was a diligent student, resulting in a strong academic foundation. She chose to study communication and digital media at the Instituto Tecnológico de Estudios Superiores Monterrey. Her resume was impressive, boasting certifications in video editing and special effects from the Academia Arte Ciate, as well as digital marketing. From a young age, Mafi demonstrated ingenuity, an innate quality that she enhanced by pouring passion into anything that could elevate her creativity. These favorable conditions made it no surprise that she excelled in digital content creation, photography, and video editing. Mafi was the soul behind Mesh Productions, a small production house she created that reflected her passion for audiovisual production, visible through her social media presence. Her professional journey also included a role as a journalist at a magazine from 2018 to 2021, where she helped to increase the presence and prestige of her alma mater through social media content and contributed to educational note writing for Connecta. Between 2020 and 2022, Maffei interned in innovation and digital marketing at Kellogg's Company, also taking on a leadership role as the director of editing and production at Emporio Studio, where she worked on projects for well-known companies. In February of 2023, the next chapter of her life brought her to Germany to pursue a master's degree in new media design at the European University of Applied Sciences. Ever enthusiastic to acquire new knowledge and meet new people, Maffei settled in a modest apartment in the Berlin district of Treptow-Köpenick, maintaining her sociable spirit and contagious joy. Despite feeling the impact of the distance from her homeland, she stayed connected with her family through phone and video calls, sharing her excitement about her new experiences and friendships. However, in July of 2023, a post in a group for Latinas in Germany on a well-known social network revealed a sign of vulnerability. Maffei was seeking a Spanish-speaking psychologist as she was going through a very difficult time. Like anyone away from home, although she had chosen to go abroad for personal growth, Maffei was also facing her own challenges. Despite new friendships and adventures in Germany, she began to feel a deep longing for her home, family, and culture. Maffei's life took a dark turn on Saturday, July 22, 2023. Although she had planned to attend the annual LGBTQ community celebration in Berlin, she decided at the last moment to stay in her apartment to work on an academic project. This wasn't out of character for her, as she had always been very responsible, especially when it came to her studies. Despite the allure of the celebration, she chose to fulfill her duties. Just before noon, Maffei spoke with her family in Mexico. The conversation was like any other day, but it turned out to be their last. After this seemingly normal interaction, Maffei left her room in the student residence in Treptow-Köpenick, disappearing without a trace. The following Sunday was unusually quiet from Maffei's end, which seemed strange to her family. They thought she might be busy or resting, but as the hours passed and she didn't respond to her family's regular calls, their worry increased. They tried to remain calm and ward off dark thoughts, but anxiety started to take over. Finally, on Monday, July 24, concern turned into action, and Maffei's family contacted the authorities at the student residences to request they check on her apartment to ensure everything was all right. The state in which they found Maffei's room turned into a perplexing mystery. First and foremost, Maffei was not there, and bizarrely, her cell phone was left on her bed, while the door to the inner courtyard was left open. These details were utterly enigmatic and led the residence administrators to alert the authorities, resulting in an immediate and extensive search. The European University of Applied Sciences, aware of the gravity of the situation, offered its support to the family and closely collaborated with the authorities in the search for Maffei. Through a statement, one of her teachers expressed the academic community's dismay of the student's disappearance and highlighted the coordinated efforts to find her. Concern peaked on July 25 when Maffei's parents, Javier and Carolina, traveled to Berlin, marking the start of an international search. The authorities issued a missing person notice, requesting any information that could shed light on her whereabouts. Although the police considered the possibility that Maffei might be facing emotional vulnerabilities, this theory was discredited by her friends and family, who emphasized that she had seemed happy and normal in the days leading up to her disappearance. Maffei's image, disseminated through a social media account created by her parents named Find Maffei Berlin, depicted a 24-year-old woman, approximately 1.53 meters tall, weighing 48 kilograms, with long brown hair and tattoos decorating her arms. 3 days into an intense mobilization led by Maffei's family, the Mexican embassy in Germany announced its full involvement in the case. A national search protocol was then implemented in a desperate attempt to find the young woman. The Mexican ambassador in Germany used his personal social media account to express his distress and urged empathy and generosity towards those who are far from their loved ones, striving to excel in an environment with a different language and customs than those of their childhood. On July 26, consular authorities announced the implementation of the protection protocol, known as Search for Nationals. This protocol involved coordination between the Mexican and German authorities, aiming to cross-check information from hospitals, schools, and even morgues, with testimonials, persons of interest, and security camera footage. However, nothing seemed to yield results. The search intensified on July 27, when the police began to explore canals and ponds in the region. Equipped with search dogs and divers, the search operations unfolded on multiple fronts, and civil society volunteer groups organized through social media to search for Maffei on streets and in public squares. They distributed flyers and pamphlets with Maffei's image and details, leaving notices in wooded areas and urban spaces alike. Meanwhile, a poster with Maffei's image was shared on social media and spread throughout Berlin, thus multiplying the efforts to find her. As the mobilized public continued their relentless search, additional snippets of information were shared online. According to those close to the young woman, Maffei's room appeared to have been rummaged through before the authorities' arrival. While the police did not confirm this detail, Maffei's father, Javier, shared in an interview that his daughter lived in a ground-floor apartment with a balcony facing the street, and the door to her apartment was inexplicably open. 5 days since Maffei left her apartment, despite the lack of concrete information, the family maintained their optimism and hope. Her father pointed out that they believed the young woman was still in Berlin, as they had not been informed by the authorities whether her passport was among her belongings. On the same day, the family issued a statement thanking Maffei's University and the organized civil society for their support. While they shared their gratitude, they underscored the importance of keeping certain aspects of the case confidential to avoid hindering the investigation. Javier revealed that his daughter had plans to move to Spain in the coming days to meet up with her boyfriend, a young man she had recently met and with whom she was starting a relationship. The boyfriend's solidarity was demonstrated by his travel from Spain to Berlin to contribute to the search for Maffei. Despite the efforts on July 31, the Berlin police reported that they had still not obtained any relevant information that could reveal Maffei's whereabouts, who had now been missing for 9 days. Up to that point, the collected evidence had not shed light on her location, and uncertainty still prevailed. On the same day, Mexican president announced his intention to seek help from his German counterpart to collaborate in the search for Maffei. Days passed slowly as Maffei's family fought to bring visibility to the case of their missing daughter, participating in various interviews to shed light on the baffling situation. In a conversation with a renowned Mexican journalist, Javier, Maria Fernanda's father, shared the challenges they had encountered in the search. He explained that in Germany, due to personal data protection laws, cameras are not allowed to film public places, complicating the tracking of clues. He also revealed the small size of the missing persons department in Germany and how the detective in charge of the case in Berlin faced an overwhelming task. Regarding the Mexican authorities, Javier shared that they had received support and had been offered psychological assistance. The Mexican authorities referred to the case as atypical due to the time elapsed and the circumstances surrounding the disappearance. He added that the family was working on issuing a yellow notice through Interpol, hoping to extend the search beyond the borders of Germany and Mexico. Despite the many tears shed, he said they maintained strength and a positive attitude in their quest to find their daughter amid the difficulties and uncertainties surrounding the case. Desperation and uncertainty lingered as the days passed without news of Maffei. On August 3rd, following exhaustive searches and without encouraging results, Interpol issued a yellow notice for her location practically worldwide. Although authorities considered it unlikely that she had left Germany or the Schengen area, this measure reflected the determination to find her. On Friday, August 4th, a spokesperson for the Berlin police shared in an interview with local media that they had verified her possible whereabouts and were closely following up on the received information. However, the lack of details left everyone in suspense. While the Berlin police had gathered up to 120 clues about Maffei's disappearance, Concrete evidence that could lead to her exact location remained elusive. Meanwhile, on Saturday, August 5th, the young woman's parents organized a solidarity event in front of the Mexican embassy in Berlin. About 200 young Berliners, dressed in white and carrying lit candles and messages of encouragement, gathered to keep the search alive and show their support for the family. In the midst of this emotional scene, the feared news arrived in the early afternoon. Maffei's lifeless body had been found floating in a canal in Berlin. The search for Maria Fernanda Sanchez had come to a tragic end. Heartbroken, her loved ones confirmed the tragic outcome. Despite the search efforts and the maintained hope, the reality was unrelenting. It was revealed that the student's body had been found by a person walking across a bridge. Although authorities had previously searched the area with divers, it was later explained that the canal was extensive and its waters had hidden the tragic secret. The community gathered in mourning and solidarity, but also to demand answers. The search took a dark turn as it entered a new phase, determining the circumstances surrounding the young woman's death. Meanwhile, the police stated that there was no suspicion of third-party involvement and reiterated that the investigation was ongoing. The Mexican ambassador in Germany shared that the next step in the case would be an autopsy of Maffei to shed light on the causes of her death. Although he assured that the body showed no signs of violence, caution was maintained until the autopsy was completed. In a statement issued by the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Embassy of Mexico in Berlin, the Sanchez Castaneda family expressed their gratitude for the support received on both sides of the Atlantic. They especially thanked those who had volunteered for the search efforts and requested respect for their daughter's memory and privacy as they navigated the difficult circumstances of their loss. The painful chapter in the life of Maria Fernanda had come to an end. However, questions still lingered in the air. Pain and sadness spread throughout Mexico as news broke of the tragic end in the search for Maffei. Social media was filled with messages of comfort and wishes for eternal rest for her. Over 24,000 followers joined in a gesture of solidarity, while a feminist collective in Berlin and other volunteer groups also expressed their support with messages filled with love and strength. Politicians from various political streams in Mexico joined in the mourning, sending prayers, solidarity, and condolences to the parents, family, and friends of the young woman. The Secretary of Foreign Affairs in Mexico and current senator trusted that consular authorities would provide support to the family in this difficult time. The discovery of the body marked a new chapter in the investigation. It was known that the German authorities had received more than 120 leads about the young woman, and there were indications pointing to the days before her disappearance. But the situation remained secretive, and if there was any result from that part of the investigation, it is something that has not transpired. Although 2 weeks of intense search involved 500 people and covered more than 3,000 kilometers, there are still unanswered questions. According to Mexican media, the Maffei case brought to light a pending issue for the diplomatic representations of that country in Europe. Attention to mental health. The debate that opened highlighted that adapting to new cultural codes, discrimination, lack of support networks, and insecurity could deeply affect young people seeking a life abroad. The Mexican embassy in Germany reminded of the availability of a free window for access to mental health, while the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Mexico offered tools a free psychological support platform for Mexicans in France and Monaco. A video shared by friends of Maffei, showing the young woman laughing and singing, reminded of her extroverted personality and all the vital energy that characterized her. That is why they asked for explanations to understand what really happened. On August 7th, 2 days after the discovery, Maffei's parents said that the Berlin police had not allowed them to identify their daughter's body. Sources close to the family confirmed that only the Berlin police had identified the 24-year-old young woman. The police statement reiterated that it could not be assumed that the young woman's death occurred due to the responsibility of third parties, but at the same time warned that the precise circumstances remained unclear. Media speculation was kept at bay, aware of the need to respect the official version. However, The police statement about Matthie's exceptional psychological situation and comments about her mental health raised suspicions about the true intention to investigate what happened to the last consequences. The how and why of her death were mysteries that tormented the Latin American community in Berlin. Attention was focused on the autopsy, a crucial step to dispel speculation. The most recent news occurred on August 9th and was published by a newspaper in Mexico, an informative medium that announced new delays in the autopsy. The newspaper managed to get answers from a spokesperson for the Berlin prosecutor's office, who announced that they would have to wait about 2 months to know the results of the autopsy, and that nothing is certain regarding the date of delivery of the body to the family. She pointed out that the autopsy had been ordered, but that it had not yet been carried out due to the workload and shortage of personnel. She added that it would take about 8 weeks before the result is available. Only from that moment can they think about releasing the body, but perhaps more investigations will be necessary before being able to deliver the remains to the family. The future of the investigation still does not seem to indicate immediate results. The repatriation of the body and the parents' decision on the final destination of Matthie depend on the results of the autopsy. The community cries out for clear answers and definitive closure, while the mystery surrounding the young student continues to weigh on the hearts of all those who followed her story with hope and much anguish. Marlene Warren was born on April 15, 1950, in Michigan, USA. Growing up without a father, she dreamt of having a large and close-knit family from a young age. This dream soon became a reality when she married a man named John, with whom she had 2 children. However, years later, the family faced an unexpected tragedy when John suddenly passed away from an illness, leaving Marlene alone with her 2 young children. Marlene dedicated herself to work, striving to support her children on her own. 6 years after her husband's death, Marlene met a man named Michael Warren. They soon married, and Michael was involved in the used car business. After marrying, he started his own business in this sector. By this time, Marlene was earning good money and chose to invest in Michael's business, also assisting in its management. The business thrived, and the couple expanded it, buying several properties to rent out, improving their financial situation significantly. The family moved to Wellington, a luxurious suburb of Miami, where they bought a large house. Although their life seemed almost perfect, another tragedy struck in 1988 when Marlene's eldest son died in a car accident, deeply affecting her and her younger son, Joseph. After her son's death, Marlene considered selling the rental properties. While the business was profitable, it was also a constant source of worry. Issues with tenants not paying rent or losing their income were common, and Marlene, being kind-hearted and empathetic due to her own past struggles, found it difficult to evict people. However, she and Michael couldn't afford to let people live in their properties for free. Eventually, Marlene wanted to get out of the business to avoid these moral dilemmas. 2 years had passed since her son's death, and the family was beginning to recover and return to normalcy. However, on the morning of May 26, 1990, something terrible and unexpected occurred. Marlene was at home with her son and 3 of his friends who had come over for breakfast. Their kitchen had a view of the driveway. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and Marlene went to answer it. Her son saw a white Chrysler parked in front of their house. When Marlene opened the front door, she was greeted by a person dressed as a clown, holding 2 balloons and a bouquet of flowers. Marlene commented, "How cute," but then something unexpected happened. The clown who appeared at Marlene Warren's doorstep suddenly pulled out a gun and shot her in the head. Marlene's son and his friends, who were in the house, rushed to the hallway, only to be met with the shocking sight of Marlene bleeding on the ground. The clown, dressed in full costume, stared at them for a few seconds before returning to the white Chrysler and driving away. Marlene's son, despite having an injured leg, urged his friend to drive after the clown, but they were unable to locate the vehicle. Marlene was quickly taken to the hospital in an unconscious state, and the police began their investigation. They first spoke with everyone in the house at the time of the attack. Marlene's son could not identify the assailant due to the costume, gloves, and wig, noting only that the attacker had very dark eyes. His friends added that the clown was quite tall, and that the work shoes worn were strikingly different from the costume. A neighbor walking their dog near Marlene's house also saw the clown but couldn't provide significant information to the police. The investigators started looking for a white Chrysler and sought other evidence. Their first suspicion fell on Michael, Marlene's husband, who had left for a Miami racetrack that morning and was not at home during the attack. Despite having reasons to believe he was involved, such as the family's fondness for clowns and an anonymous tip to investigate Michael and a 26-year-old woman named Sheila Keene, the police found that Michael was around 110 kilometers away from home, making it physically impossible for him to commit the crime. Sheila Keene, who worked at Michael's used car business, was rumored to be having a secret affair with him. This relationship had been speculated by some colleagues. If Michael was in a relationship with another woman and wanted to leave Marlene, he faced a significant financial loss in a divorce, as most of the family assets were in Marlene's name. Despite the lack of concrete evidence linking Michael and Sheila to the crime, the police still considered their involvement probable. Given the disguise used by the assailant, the police considered whether Sheila could have been the clown. Witnesses couldn't confirm the attacker's gender, and Sheila was known for her assertive character. She handled clients who were late on rental payments, often needing to repossess cars, a job in which she was unyielding, and for which she carried a .38 caliber pistol, the same caliber used to shoot Marlene. After the bullet was removed from Marlene's head, it was determined to be from a .38 caliber gun, raising further suspicions about Sheila's potential involvement in the crime. The police revisited Sheila Keene to inspect her firearm, but Sheila claimed that her gun had either been stolen or lost months before Marlene Warren's shooting, leaving the detectives with no solid leads. During their investigation, they learned that Sheila was divorced and that after leaving her husband's house, Sheila moved into a rented apartment, and there were suspicions that Michael Warren, Marlene's husband, was paying for this accommodation. An interesting discovery awaited the police in their investigation regarding the whereabouts of the clown costume, balloons, and flowers used in the crime. 2 days before the attack on Marlene, a woman had entered a costume shop near Sheila's apartment. The shop was closed at the time, but the woman insisted on being served. She urgently requested a clown costume, a wig, face makeup, and a red nose. Despite being told to return the next day as the shop was closing, the woman persisted, and the employees eventually sold her the items. There were no surveillance cameras in the store, so the police had to rely on the employee's verbal description of the woman, who they described as tall and thin with dark hair. When shown photographs by the detectives, the employees indicated that the woman resembled Sheila. The investigation also traced the balloons and flowers to a supermarket located about 1 kilometer from Sheila's apartment. The seller reported that a woman matching the description given by the costume shop employees had purchased these items just a few hours before Marlene was shot. He added that the customer behaved rudely and somewhat masculinely. 2 days into the investigation, on May 28, the police were informed that Marlene had succumbed to her injuries, and the case was reclassified as a murder. The detectives continued their investigation, seeking more evidence against Sheila. They obtained a warrant to search her apartment. Concurrently, they received a tip about a white Chrysler parked 13 kilometers from Marlene's residence. Upon inspection, the investigators confirmed it was the same vehicle driven by the assailant. Inside, they found long dark hairs and orange fibers that appeared to be from a clown wig. During a search of Sheila's apartment, the police found identical orange particles and work boots that matched the description given by witnesses, similar to those worn by the clown. However, due to the absence of routine DNA analysis at that time, All the evidence against Sheila was circumstantial, which could lead to her acquittal in court. Detectives then turned their attention to how the clown had acquired the car used to reach Marlene's house. They uncovered that about 1.5 months before Marlene's murder, a man had mistakenly rented a car from one of Michael Warren's main competitors. When this mix-up was reported to Michael, his reaction was notably strange. Rather than informing a customer about a mistaken car rental from one of his competitors, Michael Warren told the man to just leave the car in the parking lot and put the keys inside. Michael then asked an employee to take him and Sheila to the parking lot and instructed the employee to keep quiet about the incident. The employee witnessed Michael and Sheila leaving in the same white Chrysler. This happened shortly after a serious disagreement between Michael and his competitors, where Michael had been giving his competitors a negative image in his advertisements, which they disliked. Detectives decided to investigate Michael's business further and found numerous legal infractions, including tax and insurance manipulation. They also found evidence suggesting that Michael had used illegal methods to repossess cars, even when clients had paid on time and met all conditions. During this investigation, police spoke with an employee who recalled an interesting incident where Michael and Marlene had an argument at work. After Marlene left, Michael asked the employee how much it would cost to make his wife disappear. Although this sounded suspicious, detectives still had no evidence linking Michael to the murder. Nevertheless, he was arrested for various business manipulations and initially sentenced to 8 years in prison, but was released after 4 years. In 2002, Michael married Sheila and moved to another state. Although detectives could never prove Michael's involvement in the murder, they continued to monitor him. After moving, Sheila began introducing herself to new acquaintances as a police officer and had dyed her hair from dark to blonde. She and Michael opened a restaurant and seemed to have built a good life. However, rumors began circulating among their employees that Sheila had murdered Michael's ex-wife. Apparently, an employee stumbled upon information about the crime and discovered that the police had suspected them. Still, without definitive proof, the case remained unresolved until it was reopened in 2013. A new investigative team requested a re-examination of all available evidence, as DNA testing and other forensic technologies had significantly advanced since 1990. It took several years to re-examine the evidence. First, the orange fibers found in Sheila's apartment, the car, and the crime scene were compared, showing they were almost identical. The most significant lead came later when experts took DNA samples from several hairs found in the white Chrysler and compared them to Sheila's DNA, which matched perfectly. This provided irrefutable evidence that Sheila had been in the same car the clown used to drive to Marlene's house. Sheila was arrested in 2017, then 54 years old, and continued to deny her guilt. She was denied bail and awaited trial in jail. Michael insisted he had nothing to do with Marlene's murder and believed Sheila was innocent as well. He hired expensive lawyers for her, and the trial had been prolonged for years. In preparation for the trial, the police uncovered some previously unknown facts. About a year after Marlene Warren's murder, an attorney who had worked with Michael Warren on business matters contacted them. He revealed that approximately a year before the murder, Michael had asked him a very strange question. If a husband kills his wife, what happens to the property registered in her name? Would it go to the husband? The attorney was surprised by this question, but advised Michael that if the husband arranged for an acquaintance to commit the murder and the court couldn't link the husband to the killer, he would inherit the woman's assets. Furthermore, the attorney shockingly advised Michael that if the murderer wore some kind of disguise, like a clown's, they would likely never be identified and thus escape punishment. Another shocking confession came from a man whose deceased father had worked for Michael at the time of the murder. He confessed that his father had helped carry out illegal plans for extra money, such as rolling back odometers to sell cars at higher prices. On the day of the murder, Michael asked his father to dispose of the gun and the car used by the murderer after abandoning the Chrysler in the parking lot. Before dying, the man's father revealed that the second car was hidden in a river canal. The police found the car in the canal, confirming the witness's truthfulness, although no evidence survived. Sheila's trial was repeatedly postponed until a final date was set for May 12, 2023. However, on April 25, something unexpected happened. Sheila pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty she would have faced if she lost the murder trial. Her lawyer stated that Sheila was innocent of the murder, but feared for her life, and thus accepted responsibility for someone else's crime. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison for second-degree murder, with about 5.5 years deducted for the time already served and further reduced for good behavior. She was expected to spend an additional 16 to 24 months in prison. As for Michael, his involvement has not been proven, and he remains free. It's unlikely he will ever be charged with his wife's murder, as there is no direct evidence against him. Marlene's son, the sole member of his family, thanked the detectives for uncovering the truth and keeping the case alive for years. Despite the profound tragedy of his mother's death, he overcame his grief, opened his own small construction business, and rebuilt his life. Francisco Benitez, known as Paco, entered the world on December 13, 1963, in Algeciras, a city in Spain. Growing up alongside his two brothers and one sister, he spent his childhood in a town bordering Morocco. Paco received his education at a Catholic boarding school. When he turned 20, he made a significant move to Seville, where his parents, including his mother, whose occupation remains unknown, and his father, a retired nursing assistant, had settled. In 1986, Paco embarked on a new journey by enlisting in the French Foreign Legion, a branch of the French military with a storied history dating back to 1831. During his service, Paco was assigned to various missions, including deployments to the Persian Gulf and Gabon, where he demonstrated his dedication and valor. In recognition of his service, he was honored with the Cross of War and the Military Medal. In 1988, while stationed at Marseille, Paco's path crossed with Marie Jose, or Maria Jose, as he called her, a French woman working in bars near the port he frequented. Maria Jose was a single mother raising 4 children, each from a different father. Paco and Maria Jose began dating and soon decided to move in together. Over time, their family expanded, and on May 24, 1994, Maria Jose and Paco welcomed their first child together, Allison, who became Paco's cherished firstborn daughter. Paco was known for his deep love and protective nature as a father, although he also had a history of infidelity. Around 1998, Paco embarked on a tumultuous relationship with Simone de Oliveira Alves, a young woman of Brazilian origin with 4 children. He met Simone in a club, and for some years he led a double life with her until their relationship ultimately came to an end in late 2004. Despite Maria Jose's discovery of Paco's infidelity, she chose to forgive him. More than a decade after Allison's birth, Maria Jose and Paco decided to formalize their relationship through marriage. Their wedding took place on November 10, 2006. This event marked the occasion when Maria Jose adopted her husband's last name, and they both endeavored to build a harmonious and contented life together. In 2010, Paco experienced another relocation, this time to the recruitment area of the French Foreign Legion in Perpignan, a city situated in southern France. As of December 2012, troubles began to emerge within the couple's relationship, culminating in their separation. Maria Jose initiated divorce proceedings, driven by a discovery made by their daughter during the Christmas of 2012. It was during this time that Allison stumbled upon messages of affection exchanged between her father and a new romantic interest named Dolores, a fellow soldier stationed in Perpignan. Learning of Paco's continued infidelity, Maria Jose confronted him, no longer willing to tolerate his unfaithfulness, which ultimately led to his departure from their home. Despite the challenges in his marriage, Paco continued to engage in romantic pursuits. He parted ways with Dolores when she sought a more committed relationship, and he subsequently commenced a new affair with a familiar face, compatriot Maria Teresa, who worked as a guard at the French consulate in Barcelona. Meanwhile, as her mother navigated the complexities of divorce proceedings, Allison sought to lead a typical life for a young person her age. At 19, she secured employment at a hair salon and nurtured her interests in modeling and beauty pageants, passions that had taken root in her early years. Allison's educational achievements, kindness, and natural beauty had earned her a coveted spot in a beauty competition scheduled for August 11, 2013. Winning this competition would have opened doors for her, guaranteeing participation in Miss France 2014 and bringing her one step closer to realizing her dream of being crowned the most beautiful woman in her country. However, on July 14, 2013, while the French were celebrating their national holiday, a preparatory meeting for the contestants took place. Surprisingly, Allison did not attend this crucial meeting, causing surprise among her fellow contestants and organizers. From that day onwards, neither she nor her mother were heard from again. According to Paco's account, on Sunday the 14th, he had driven his daughter to the pre-contest meeting. Subsequently, he returned to their family home, where he found himself embroiled in an argument with Maria Jose over an electricity bill. Paco stated that he later went back to pick up Allison, and they both returned to their city of residence. Upon their arrival, he discovered that Maria Jose had packed her bags, seemingly preparing to leave the house with her younger daughter, heading towards Toulouse. This was the story Paco shared with anyone seeking news of Allison and Maria Jose. A text message sent from Maria Jose's phone at 5:17 p.m. on that Sunday seemed to corroborate this account. In the message, she informed her eldest daughter, Lydia, that they were going to Toulouse. She found this decision reasonable, given that her sister aspired to work for a renowned cosmetics manufacturer, and Maria Jose was also in search of employment in that town. Unfortunately, this was the last communication received from them. Allison was known for her active presence on social media, but on July 14, shortly before 5 p.m., her Facebook account went silent. Concern began to grow among those closest to her, especially considering her consistent online activity. After multiple unsuccessful attempts to contact them, a family friend eventually reported their disappearance to the police. Initially, authorities argued that since both Maria Jose and Allison were adults, they had the freedom to travel without notifying anyone. However, the pressure from concerned family members eventually led Paco to make the difficult decision to report the disappearance of Maria Jose, aged 53, and Allison, aged 19, on July 25. This action marked the initiation of a police investigation into their mysterious disappearance. Investigations unveiled unsettling details. Both of their phones had been switched off since July 14, and no credit card transactions were recorded. Furthermore, there was no trace of the mother and daughter at Toulouse or the Perpignan train station, both logical departure points given that they did not possess a car or driver's licenses for independent travel. Interviews with friends and family firmly ruled out the possibility of them running away, particularly in Allison's case, as she was deeply enthusiastic about her life in Perpignan and her dream of becoming a beauty queen. A delegate from the Miss France committee shared in an interview that participating in the competition had been Allison's dream, and she had been highly motivated. She also recounted how Allison would frequently call for advice on what to wear in the days leading up to events. Additionally, she emphasized Allison's punctuality and her habit of notifying them if she was running late, making her sudden absence without explanation all the more perplexing. The investigation naturally focused on Paco, as he was the last person known to have seen them alive. Compounding his situation, the ongoing issues with his ex-partner and revelations of his double life made him the prime suspect. Media coverage of the case intensified, and the French public became engrossed in the unfolding mystery. Journalists crowded the street where the family's house was located, and passers-by didn't hesitate to direct accusations at Paco. On August 5, 3 weeks after the disappearance of his ex-wife and daughter, 50-year-old Paco was tragically discovered deceased. He had taken his own life by hanging himself in the barracks of the Foreign Legion, where he worked as a recruitment officer. Forensic experts determined that his death occurred between 5 and 7 in the morning of that fateful day. Following Paco's tragic death, a series of emails and letters addressed to coworkers and family members came to light, along with a final video that was published on the website of a French magazine. In these messages, Paco expressed his enduring love for his wife and daughter, emphasizing that the burden of suspicion had pushed him to take his own life. One of Paco's last lovers recounted that he had vehemently maintained his innocence and couldn't bear the weight of being viewed as the prime suspect in a crime against his daughter and former wife. French media initially reported that Paco's suicide was driven by overwhelming guilt. However, Maria Jose's brother conveyed a different perspective when he spoke to journalists. He did not believe that his brother-in-law had harmed his family or played a role in their disappearance. He described the last time he had seen Paco on Sunday of August 4 as a moment when Paco appeared utterly broken. Paco had described himself as a man of honor, but with nothing left to lose. During that interaction, he also shared his suspicion that his sister had left their home in a fit of anger and might be in a place where she couldn't easily return due to the scandal surrounding her disappearance. These statements introduced doubt about Paco's guilt and even stirred feelings of sympathy and compassion for the deceased legionnaire. However, the same video and news of Paco's death brought forth a revelation that altered the course of the narrative. This revelation harkened back to 2004 and pertained to Simone, the woman with whom Paco had a double life. It emerged that upon learning of Paco's death through the news, Simone's relatives recognized him and promptly contacted the authorities. They revealed that Paco had been Simone's lover for 6 years until her inexplicable disappearance. In connection to this, one of Simone's sisters disclosed that shortly before vanishing, Simone had been hospitalized due to either a spontaneous abortion or an attempted suicide following a violent altercation with Paco. This fight reportedly occurred because Simone had discovered that Paco had not yet separated from his wife, Maria Jose. Tragically, Simone never reappeared, and Paco moved on with his life. As investigators compared both cases, they noted some striking similarities. Firstly, in both cases, the last sign of life from the women involved was a text message sent from their phones. Simone informing Paco that she was leaving, and Maria Jose sending a message to one of her daughters. These parallels raised questions and added a layer of complexity to the mystery surrounding the disappearances. Another notable similarity in both cases relates to the delay in reporting the disappearances by Paco. In November 2004, he waited for several days before reporting Simone's disappearance to the police, a pattern that raised suspicion, even though he could no longer be prosecuted for the crimes committed. In late September 2013, a report raised disturbing questions. It was revealed that in mid-July, Paco had purchased a significant quantity of lye, a chemical known for its ability to degrade DNA, making it challenging for forensic experts to detect traces of cleaned blood at a crime scene. During meticulous forensic examinations, officials from the crime lab discovered compelling evidence of a substantial blood spill that had been meticulously cleaned both in the residence where Maria Jose and Allison lived and in the barracks where Paco worked. Specifically, blood was confirmed to be present in the drainage of a freezer. A fellow soldier recounted that on July 17, he had assisted Paco in transporting this freezer from his home to the Legion's headquarters. The same witness informed the police that he had seen traces of blood in a clogged sink within Paco's apartment. Moreover, Officials found indications of blood in the room that Paco occupied within the barracks and within a washing machine where he had been observed washing sheets and clothing. Other unsettling details centered around the alleged disappearance of approximately 30 bed sheets from the military installation in July. Additionally, there were reports of a soldier who had witnessed Paco using a hose to clean a carpet from which a reddish liquid was emerging, a situation the man had explained as a result of staining while defrosting meat. Despite the high hopes generated by these revelations, the police faced difficulties in conclusively establishing the connection between Allison's DNA and the traces of washed blood or determining whether it resulted from the young girl's contact with the analyzed items. But her mother's blood DNA was found in the family washing machine. The neighbors also recalled Paco switching his vehicle from a white car to a dark van around the time of their disappearance. The van was subsequently seized by the police for further examination, although initial tests did not yield any immediate results. Nevertheless, the introduction of this new evidence into the case file only served to intensify suspicions of criminal involvement by Paco. As discussions surrounding Paco's possible connection to the disappearances gained momentum, reactions from those who knew the family were swift. Allison's former boss expressed how the entire community was deeply shaken by the unfolding story. Allison had been a beloved and dedicated employee at the hair salon, and her absence had a profound impact on the clientele. To them, it was inconceivable that her father could be linked to her disappearance. An unnamed family member told French media that Allison had been actively trying to understand the true nature of Paco. She questioned why her affectionate father was frequently absent, including during holidays like Christmas. She even harbored suspicions that her father might have had a double life with another family elsewhere and was possibly tracking one of his lovers on the internet. These revelations added layers of complexity and intrigue to the already perplexing case. Maria Jose's brother, whom we've mentioned previously, shared the ongoing anguish that his family endured 5 months after that fateful July 14. He revealed that their desperation had not subsided since the beginning of the ordeal. He described how his life had come to a standstill, often disrupted by sleepless nights where he would turn to his computer in search of answers. He also expressed deep concern for his nephews, Maria Jose's other children, who had essentially been raised by Paco and affectionately referred to him as Dad. In contrast to his initial impressions after the disappearances, he stated that all the elements of the investigation seemed to point towards Paco as the primary suspect in the eyes of his family. However, he acknowledged that the evidence incriminating Paco was not sufficient to definitively prove that he had murdered Maria Jose and Allison. On the other hand, he remained open to the possibility that Paco might have had an accomplice. This theory arose from the last message allegedly sent by Maria Jose, which was written in impeccable French. He believed it couldn't have been Paco's work, as he struggled with the French language and had poor writing skills. He emphasized that at times when he communicated with Paco, he even had to ask him to rewrite sentences because they were incomprehensible. He vividly remembered Paco as a fiercely protective father who had never exhibited any signs of violence, making it inconceivable to him that Paco could harm his own daughter. He recounted that on the night before Paco took his own life, they spent 2 hours with him, and he appeared utterly devastated, continuously mentioning that he was going to do something reckless. Later that evening, Paco went to have dinner with one of his military colleagues, and when he called him again an hour later, Paco seemed calm. What struck him as very strange was the fact that he had to learn about the disappearances through television on August 1. In the midst of the turmoil, he reached out to Paco, who explained the disappearance and the supposed journey undertaken by Maria Jose and Allison. Paco reminded him that Maria Jose had left their home for 4 days on a prior occasion. Additionally, Paco apologized for not being in touch and claimed to have lost his contacts. 1 year after Allison and her mother's inexplicable disappearance, the judge in charge met with Maria Jose's brother, who had become the main civil party involved in the perplexing case. In that conversation, Maria Jose's brother was informed that investigations were still ongoing, reigniting a glimmer of hope that someday they might uncover the truth. Following this meeting, Maria Jose's brother candidly admitted that he woke up every morning with the hope of receiving a call, informing him that they had been found. Although he had become more cautious and less optimistic over time, he underscored the importance of discovering the whole truth. He had become convinced of Paco's involvement in his family member's disappearance when Marie's DNA was found in the washing machine. He acknowledged that his life had essentially come to a halt since his sister and niece vanished. He dedicated all his time to collecting, comparing, and assembling evidence, driven by an unwavering determination to uncover the truth. Almost 3 years after the mysterious disappearances, it appeared that definitive evidence was within reach, though investigators exercised caution in their pursuit of the truth. During that time, bone fragments were discovered on a secluded beach. The seemingly human bones were stumbled upon by none other than Maria Jose's own brother, who found them inside a plastic bag. He swiftly arrived at the scene after receiving a tip from a witness and immediately alerted the authorities. 5 investigators from the judicial police were tasked with conducting excavations, with the presence of a forensic doctor who played a crucial role in extracting the bones. The discovery prompted the investigation to determine the causes of death. The police announced that DNA analysis would be conducted in the following days, but the expected resolution did not materialize. The family's lawyer held a strong belief that these remains belonged to the 2 missing women. His conviction was grounded in the fact that shortly after their disappearance, it was determined through the location data of his cell phone that Paco had been in close proximity to the location where the bones were discovered. Indeed, in the months that followed July 2013, exhaustive searches had been carried out in that expansive sandy area, all to no avail. The most recent information regarding this enigmatic case dates back to the year 2021, indicating that the bodies of Maria and Allison had still not been located. The family's lawyer, in his assessment, contended that the case had been mishandled from the very beginning. He explained that the initial hours and days are crucial in solving a crime, and therefore the delayed report significantly impeded the investigation. In his view, the prospects of unraveling the mystery surrounding the disappearance of Maria Jose and Allison might have extinguished on the same day. Paco took his own life, carrying all his secrets to the grave. On the morning of July 18, 2019, thousands of Japanese people in the city of Kyoto were surprised in the middle of their usual morning activities by a very unusual event. That morning, out of nowhere, the entire city could hear the sound of multiple ambulances and fire trucks racing through Kyoto with their sirens blaring, startling the entire population. Most Japanese who witnessed the massive mobilization of ambulances and patrols couldn't help but wonder what could be the cause of this, while simultaneously thinking that whatever it was, it had to be something serious because all these vehicles seemed to be heading to the same location, disregarding the usual heavy traffic in Kyoto mid-morning, causing all cars and bicycles on the road to give way to the authorities. By 11 a.m. on this summer morning, it became apparent to the population that indeed, all this professional equipment was heading to the same building. Emergency services had received multiple calls reporting an explosion heard around 10:30 in the morning, and the worst part was that the building was reported to be engulfed in flames. As the fire quickly spread throughout the first floor, most of the people inside couldn't escape the flames. This place was an office complex belonging to the company Kyoto Animation, an animation studio founded in 1981 that had produced various anime and manga novels of all kinds. Throughout its history, it has released great works that have captivated both Japanese and international audiences due to its high production standards. Alerted by the calls they had received, which evidenced the severity of the situation, the emergency services instructed all available personnel to arrive at the scene as quickly as possible. When they arrived at the building, the situation looked much worse than expected. Several neighbors who lived nearby were observing the scene from what they thought was a safe distance while they waited for the firefighters and paramedics. The scene of the fire was, to put it mildly, disheartening. The flames enveloped the entire building and leaped out of the windows, creating long tongues of fire that immediately hindered the efforts of the firefighters trying to contain the fire and rescue those who were still trapped inside what had become a deadly concrete trap. The police officers began to instruct the neighbors to move further away from the scene, as in many cases of fires and explosions, there was a significant possibility that the building could collapse. According to reports at the time, there were 73 company employees working there at the moment of the fire. From the moment they set foot on the street, the paramedics knew they had a lot of work to do, because even the employees who had managed to escape the offices were now at the foot of the burning building, seriously injured, some unable to move or unconscious. Most of them had suffered terrible injuries and cuts while trying to exit the building. The most terrible part was that most of them had severe third-degree burns. These are classified as such because they affect the deepest layers of the skin and require immediate medical attention, as they have a high risk of infection. Additionally, when a person has these burns in multiple parts of their body, or almost entirely, as was the case with some of these studio workers, the chances of losing their life are very high. For this reason, it was crucial that the workers receive timely treatment, so emergency doctors began to separate the injured according to the severity of their injuries in order to assist those who needed urgent medical help. This way, the most affected individuals began to be stabilized before being transported to the hospital by ambulance. At this point, the number of severely injured people was so high that more than 30 ambulances had to be mobilized in total to transport the victims of the supposed accident. It's important to clarify that the authorities believed before arriving at the scene that this was an accidental fire. However, what was happening just a block away from the scene would give a very drastic twist to this story. Just 100 meters from the burning building, some police officers from a nearby train station were detaining a man who had been chased there by Kyoto Animation employees. The man had serious burns on his face and various parts of his body. This raised several questions because why would the authorities subdue a man who appeared to be a victim of the fire? In addition to all this, multiple witnesses were reporting to the police officers present at the scene that they had seen a man enter the animation studio around 10:30 that morning with what appeared to be bottles of gasoline. So with this and the testimonies of the survivors of the tragedy who were conscious, the authorities understood that this was an arson attack and therefore a mass murder. When the firefighters were able to control the fire enough to enter the building and analyze the scene, they observed that the death toll of this tragedy had risen to 34 people. Shortly after, it would increase to 36, as 2 of the injured, suffering from the effects of their burns, could not endure any longer and lost their lives. The man was arrested, as the same employees who had pursued him claimed that he was responsible, and the same police officers who had arrested him during his transfer to the hospital testified that this man began shouting that yes, he was the one who had caused the fire at Kyoto Animation, justifying it by saying that everyone inside deserved to die because they had stolen his work without giving him any recognition. Once at the hospital, the first thing known was that the suspect's name was Shinji Alba, and he was 41 years old. He had many injuries covering his entire body from the fire he allegedly caused. Once his wounds had healed enough for him to be kept in a cell without dying from an infection, a lengthy interrogation awaited him so that the entire country and the world would have an idea of what motivated him to commit such a horrible crime. Not much is known about this man's childhood, as his parents were born in a small village. Shinji's maternal grandfather was an honorable man who had taken on 2 jobs simultaneously to support his family. He mainly worked transporting goods by cart to Tokyo. He was considered a very kind and hardworking man until one day he was diagnosed with advanced cancer and, unable to afford the treatment that would save him, he made the decision to take his own life to avoid burdening his family with the responsibility of helping him. Shinji's mother would meet the man who would become the father of her children during her adolescence. The problem arose because this man was almost 17 years older than her when they met, and it was known that he was married at the time. As a result, the woman's family strongly disapproved of their relationship, which is a very serious matter in Japan, as Japanese society places a significant emphasis on appearances. However, against all odds, she escaped from her parents' home, never to return. After running away, she started working in a factory near Kyoto, and eventually she got married with the older man. The couple had 3 children, of whom there is only information available about Shinji and his sister. After leading what seemed to be a relatively normal life, it appears that Shinji's mother wanted some excitement and began an affair with a much younger man than her husband. When she was caught, she left home, leaving her husband, who earned a living as a taxi driver, completely alone and responsible for their 3 children. This continued to be the family's normal life until 1999, when a car accident left the father paralyzed. He was subsequently fired from the taxi company where he worked, leaving the man, who was already struggling to make ends meet, without the possibility of working to pay rent and provide food for his 3 children. Faced with this overwhelming pressure and distress, the man made the tragic decision to end it all. Despite all this, up to a certain point, Shinji had led a relatively normal life in his youth. Nothing out of the ordinary happened during his high school years, and he even worked part-time as a document clerk for the government. After graduating, Shinji continued to work part-time at a supermarket, and when he reached his 20s, he decided to move to another city. Everything seemed to be going relatively well until his mother's disappearance and his father's death, which slowly caused his life to crumble. The young man increasingly lacked motivation to move forward, and just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, life dealt him another blow. Shinji's sister, about whom little information is available, was almost at the point of losing hope. On that day, this woman visited a temple in the city, where she started talking to a priest about all the pain she had suffered in recent years. She then prayed for the repose of her father's soul before leaving the temple without saying a word. The next day after this visit, her lifeless body was found in a hostel near the temple she had visited, and she was determined to be the cause of her own tragic ending. After his sister's death, Shinji's life began to spiral downhill. His mental and economic problems led him to commit a robbery in 2012, where he managed to escape with around 20,000 yen in his bag. However, he was arrested shortly afterward and subsequently sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. Upon his release, Shinji became a complete social outcast. Nobody wanted anything to do with him. He had no family or friends, and he struggled to maintain any relationships due to his violent temper. This isolation led him to withdraw completely into his apartment. Like a significant portion of the Japanese population, Shinji loved manga and anime. Since childhood, he had dreamt of becoming a manga writer. Faced with a bleak future and difficulties finding employment, Shinji decided to pursue his dream. He began writing light novels and drawing manga panels. At this point, Shinji's story intersects with that of Kyoto Animation, a company with an excellent reputation not only in Japan, but also internationally. Kyoto Animation's specialty is depicting the wonders and dilemmas of everyday life. In other words, they create works with characters that look childlike or relatable, making it easy for viewers to connect with them quickly. However, they often incorporate plot twists that can leave you in tears. Every year, this animation company holds a manga and novel writing contest, where enthusiasts submit their works in the hopes of getting them published or adapted by the studio, or even turned into a big screen production. In 2018, Shinji submitted one of his novels for the contest, following all the specified steps. However, despite constantly checking his email for responses, he received no reply from the animation studio. As the days passed, 40-year-old Shinji felt that his hope of becoming a successful manga writer was slipping through his fingers. Several months later, on one of those afternoons when all Shinji did was watch anime and play video games, he started watching an anime produced by Kyoto Animation. The show told the story of high school students who were involved in long-distance shooting sports. That very afternoon, Shinji felt humiliated because he realized that his idea had been stolen. Yes, you heard it right. A giant studio worth millions of dollars had allegedly stolen his story without giving him the slightest credit. Maybe they didn't steal his entire manga idea, but they had apparently lifted a scene directly from his work. Shinji was outraged because he believed that in the submission he had sent to Kyoto Animation, there was a rather inconsequential scene in which the anime's protagonists were in a supermarket buying discounted meat. According to him, this scene was identical to one in an episode of the show that had aired that week. The scene was quite generic and nothing out of the ordinary. However, likely due to his unstable mental state and isolation, Shinji couldn't stop obsessing over the idea that his idea had been stolen. He was filled with anger, wondering how they could have not even bothered to respond to his contest submission and had apparently taken advantage of his creativity without giving him the slightest credit. In reality, according to the studio, Shinji's novel submission had not passed the first elimination round conducted by the contest judges, which was why they hadn't bothered to contact him. Nevertheless, from the very beginning, Shinji demonstrated that he wasn't mentally well and acted on the belief that he had been personally attacked and blatantly robbed. All of this brings us to July 14, 2019, 4 days before the fire. 9 months earlier, Shinji had sent anonymous threats to Kyoto Animation, threatening them with death. Over 200 emails had been sent, and although employees had reported this to the police, nothing could be done because the emails were encrypted, and Shinji had waited for them to let their guard down. On that Sunday, a neighbor heard Shinji starting to hit the shared wall between their apartments. These two lived in apartments where every sound from the other side could be heard. Shinji, among them, used to be the noisiest, and they would occasionally bang on the walls to request silence from one another. However, this time, it turned out that the neighbor from the apartment above was moving, and consequently, they were the cause of the noise. The neighbor went to knock on Shinji's door, intending to explain that he wasn't the one making the noise, and to please stop banging on the wall. Before he had a chance to speak, Shinji angrily opened the door, grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, and yelled at him, "You're making too much noise. Shut up, or I'll kill you." Faced with this aggression, all of the neighbor's feelings turned to horror. From Shinji's demeanor, it was evident that he was perfectly capable of carrying out his threat. Without hesitation, he left the scene and called the police to report the assault. However, when the officers arrived at Shinji's apartment, he was already gone. It seems that this incident was the spark that would lead Shinji to commit his final act. The next day, Shinji took a bullet train to travel to Tokyo. He stayed in a hotel, and then, on Tuesday, headed to Kyoto, his final destination, where he stayed in another hotel. Several security cameras captured him in the areas near the animation studio. Several neighbors also remembered him clearly after the incident because Shinji wore the same red t-shirt and light jeans for all 4 days. Shinji spent several hours walking until he stopped at a store and bought a shopping cart. He then proceeded to a gas station where he bought 10 gallons of gasoline. With these supplies, Shinji stashed the cart and went to sleep, ready to carry out his evil plan early the next morning. On July 18, 2019, Shinji returned to the animation studio building around 10:30 in the morning, carrying his containers filled with gasoline. Upon entering, he blocked the 12 emergency exits and began to douse the studio with gasoline, taking advantage of the building's limited security, as such incidents are quite rare in Japan. Once everything was ready, Shinji struck a match, and everything started to burn. When the first people realized there was a fire, they attempted to escape through the emergency exits, but they were blocked. They ran towards the central exit where Shinji was present, still holding a gasoline container, and he began to douse the employees trying to escape while saying the word "die." This caused many people to run out into the street engulfed in flames. In just a moment, smoke had already reached the second floor of the building, and for those inside, it was too late to evacuate without suffering injuries. The building was completely engulfed in smoke in less than 2 minutes, making it difficult to breathe, and gradually, the animation studio workers began to lose consciousness due to the lack of oxygen. Most of the company's employees were on the top floor because the attack occurred during a meeting with executives from another company. It's unclear if Shinji planned this to claim more victims, but unfortunately, that day there were more people in the building than usual. To make matters worse, shortly after, an explosion rocked the building, causing the flames to burst through the windows and doors of the studio. The police believe that the combination of air and flames led to the explosion. As the fire grew, people inside the building tried to escape the flames. The majority of the victims, specifically 19 of them, were found on the 3rd floor near the stairs leading to the emergency exit on the roof. These individuals unknowingly ended up on this staircase, which acted like an oven. After causing this hellish scene, Shinji accidentally set himself on fire with the same gasoline he had used to try to burn his victims. This led him to flee the scene, but an employee of Kyoto Animation did not accept this and started to chase him. Eventually, they all ended up at a train station located 100 meters from where Shinji was finally apprehended by 2 police officers from the same station. The fire was completely extinguished after 5 hours of immense efforts by the police and firefighters. It was at this point that the authorities were able to accurately count the victims of the incident. In this attack, 36 people lost their lives, while another 34 were left with serious injuries. Of the deceased, 28 died from carbon monoxide poisoning, 6 succumbed to their burns, and 2 passed away while receiving medical treatment at the hospital. It was reported that 2/3 of the fatal victims who worked at the studio were women, as Kyoto Animation was known for hiring women in almost all of its animation positions. After spending 10 months in the hospital, Shinji was officially arrested and processed. There were concerns about his physical health, and questions arose as to whether he would be physically capable of enduring the lengthy trial schedule ahead of him. His hospital treatment had taken so long because he had suffered burns on 90% of his body. In such cases, skin donors are crucial, but the Japanese authorities correctly prioritized obtaining donors for the victims. As for Shinji, he had no other option but to accept artificial skin, becoming the first person to undergo such a significant surgery of this kind without using real skin transplants. The judicial processes in Japan are known to be slow, as they usually involve multiple stages before a clear conviction is obtained. Since the trials for Shinji began, he underwent numerous psychiatric and psychological evaluations to determine if he was mentally healthy at the time of the crime. The results were somewhat mixed because, on one hand, it was clear that Shinji's brain did not function normally, but on the other hand, he was aware of what he was doing, making it difficult to predict what sentence he would receive. The decision had to be something between the death penalty and life imprisonment. The world was deeply affected by this crime, especially the animation industry. After the fire, an American anime licensor launched a successful GoFundMe campaign with a goal of $750,000 to assist the studio and the victims' families. In less than 24 hours, they raised over $1 million for this purpose. Even the then Prime Minister of Japan expressed condolences to the families, a figure many may recognize as he was assassinated a couple of years later. The president of Kyoto Animation mentioned that he did not plan to rebuild the studio in the same location, as it would be traumatic and bring bad memories for the employees. Instead, he considered demolishing the remains of the studio to create a park with a monument dedicated to the staff and the local community. Today, most of Kyoto Animation's employees have returned to work, this time in the company's second studio. One of these employees is a veteran manga artist who has been working at Kyoto Animation since the 1980s. He returned to work after the incident, having recovered from the injuries he sustained. He mentioned that he feels better when he is working than resting. He also expressed his intention to make his future work a tribute to those who perished. Another significant detail worth mentioning is that as a result of this tragedy, Japan decided to implement a new law. It requires citizens to present identification and provide reasons for their gasoline purchases when buying it in lighters or containers. Maria Alejandra Lafuente Casco was a charming young Mexican psychologist, well known for her love of staying fit and active. She took great care of her petite figure, delighting in her own beauty and charm. With her light, wheat-colored complexion, long black hair, full lips, and deep-set eyes, she was a sight to behold. Maria Alejandra loved spending time at the beach, basking in the sun to maintain her impeccable tan. Following in her father's footsteps, the esteemed psychologist and renowned psychiatrist, Dr. Alberto Eduardo, Maria Alejandra held a deep admiration for her father, which ultimately inspired her to pursue a career in psychology. She specialized in treating adolescents and young adults dealing with depression, anxiety, and behavioral disorders. Her practice was located on the Roma Sur neighborhood in Mexico City. As a divorcee and a mother of two, Maria Alejandra was eager to find love again and create a new home for her family. However, her divorce had not been amicable. In fact, in 2011, she became involved in a shocking incident against her ex-husband. According to his statements, which remain anonymous as per authorities' decision, the incident occurred after their separation. He had gone to visit their children when Maria Alejandra asked him to enter the living room and sit on a strangely plastic-covered sofa. At first, he refused, but she insisted, claiming their daughter had a surprise for him. Reluctantly, he agreed to blindfold himself and take a seat. After several minutes of silence, not hearing any sounds from his daughter or Maria Alejandra, he grew suspicious. Just as he was confirming his suspicions, he felt a severe blow to his head. Struck by the fireplace poker, instantly removing his blindfold, he pleaded with his ex-wife to calm down. But she continued her assault. In a desperate attempt to escape, he realized the door was locked. With her ex-husband now fully at her mercy, Maria Alejandra grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed him in the abdomen and back. Cornered and in severe pain, he tried to wrest the knife from her grasp, only for her to bite his arm. The woman tried to inject him with a substance using a syringe, but he struggled and managed to get her off of him, eventually escaping. The couple's daughter, who had witnessed her parents violently confront each other on numerous occasions, saw everything that happened that traumatic night. In none of the previous instances of violence had the couple sought intervention from authorities. However, this time was different. The man believed that Maria Alejandra had gone too far, so he decided to report her. According to the files, the psychologist was accused by the Homicide Prosecutor's Office of the Mexico City Attorney General's Office of Attempted Homicide. Maria Alejandra was taken to jail, and the 67th criminal judge issued a pretrial detention order. Later, the charge was reclassified to attempted mitigated homicide. On June 14, 2012, she was sentenced to serve 1 year and 4 months in prison. However, Maria Alejandra and her lawyers quickly mobilized to obtain various benefits. As a result, she was released after obtaining a sentence substitution for the payment of fines, as well as conditional suspension of the sentence or compensation for material damage, a fine of 18,843 Mexican pesos, approximately $1,009 at the current exchange rate, and for moral damages compensation, 31,200 pesos, approximately $1,836. Despite obtaining these advantages, the defense lawyers were dissatisfied with the judicial resolution. They argued that Maria Alejandra had acted in self-defense, claiming that her ex-husband used to beat her. Therefore, they filed an appeal against the sentence, which was reviewed by the magistrates of the 9th Criminal Chamber. Ultimately, these magistrates determined that the woman was not criminally responsible and ordered her full release, lifting the sentence. Upon her release, Maria Alejandra returned to her psychology practice as if nothing had happened. The image she projected ultimately worked in her favor, as she presented herself as an empowered victim who had overcome gender violence. But with a new life came a new victim. Back in her practice, Maria Alejandra met Alan Carrera Cuellar, a 41-year-old Mexican businessman. The man was the son of Adrián Carrera Fuentes, a former director of the now-defunct Federal Judicial Police, who had had a long and fruitful career in law enforcement, holding chief positions in different institutions. Adrián, Alan's father, established several businesses aimed at supplying the construction sector with materials. He specialized mainly in the sale of tiles and founded a chain of stores in southern Mexico. While his commercial establishments were legitimate, Adrián had mafia connections. Consequently, he was removed from his position to face legal proceedings and was charged due to his direct ties with the Juarez Cartel, a Mexican criminal organization involved in drug trafficking and other illicit activities. This group controlled a significant percentage of drug trafficking from Mexico to the United States. The organization was led by Amado Carrillo, who died in 1997 in a Mexico City hospital after undergoing extensive plastic surgery to change his appearance. Adrián was accused of providing protection to both Carrillo and Juan Garcia, the leader of the Gulf Cartel. Garcia was on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list in the 1990s until his arrest in January 1996. He was later extradited to the United States, where he was convicted on 22 counts of money laundering, drug possession, and trafficking. These events are significant due to their direct and indirect impact on Alan's life. Since Adrián was associated with such influential figures in the criminal world, it was anticipated, given the accumulated evidence against him and his own confession, that he would spend at least 20 years in prison. However, by participating in the Witness Protection Program during the investigation of the Juarez Cartel by the Attorney General's Office of Mexico, he was released on July 18, 2000, to dedicate himself entirely to his businesses. Meanwhile, Alan joined the family business, managing the tile stores founded by his influential father. This role not only helped him earn a good income, but also left him with a lot of free time. He was married and had a daughter, but in early 2011, he divorced his wife, leaving him devastated, depressed, and struggling with alcoholism. That's when he decided to seek therapy and started attending psychological consultations with Alberto, Maria Alejandra's father. At the same time, his teenage daughter, affected by her parents' breakup, started attending sessions with a psychologist to learn how to cope with the consequences of their separation and to manage this traumatic process. Her father's therapist recommended this, and she ended up discussing her issues with Maria Alejandra. Alan accompanied his daughter to the clinic, and after the third session, Maria Alejandra asked the girl to introduce her to her father, claiming professional reasons. She said she wanted to talk to him to make better progress in therapy. However, this was just an excuse, as Maria Alejandra wanted to get to know Alan on a personal level. It didn't take long for them to start a romantic relationship. When the teenager found out, she was furious and stopped attending the sessions, but not before confronting Maria Alejandra about her misconduct. Maria Alejandra, assertive and intimidating, threatened to kill the young girl if she interfered with the new relationship. After a few weeks, what started as casual dates and romantic encounters turned into a formal marriage proposal from Alan. He decided to start a new life with Maria Alejandra, completely unaware of the reasons behind her separation from her ex-husband. One weekend in April 2014, Alan went to visit his family and introduced Maria Alejandra as his soon-to-be wife. They informed everyone that they would be getting married within a week, and she even mentioned that she might be pregnant. The wedding took place the following Monday, but no members of the Carrero family attended. They weren't invited under the premise that the ceremony would be very intimate. Only Maria Alejandra's father, his wife, and their children attended. Maria Alejandra, seemingly perfect, soon revealed her true nature. After the wedding, things started to change drastically. The newlyweds' relationship began to turn tumultuous, though there are not many details about what transpired between them. As Alan was a very reserved man, it is known that violence escalated in their interactions. Alan's family disapproved of his relationship with Maria Alejandra, noticing that he became more prone to anger and seemed increasingly worried. For this reason, all of Alan's loved ones preferred to keep their distance from his wife. At some point, Maria Alejandra, who had no regard for privacy, went through Alan's phone and allegedly found compromising messages that suggested he was involved with another woman. She claimed this was the final straw, stating that she was tired of enduring constant mistreatment from Alan and was unwilling to tolerate his infidelity as well. Convinced that trying to save the relationship was futile, she did not want to try therapy. She also didn't consider legally ending the relationship through a divorce, as they both had done with their previous marriages. To her, there was only one way to solve the problem: eliminate her husband. From that point on, she coldly calculated every step to execute her plan perfectly. Meanwhile, Alan seemed unaware of the extent of the conflict with Maria Alejandra and maintained his work routines and contact with his family. Despite the family's differences with his new wife, Alan remained close to his loved ones, communicating daily through WhatsApp. They respected his decisions, and although they found the marriage to be somewhat rushed, they continued to support him. Surprisingly, the family contact dynamic changed abruptly. On October 31, 2014, Alan exchanged messages with his family for the last time. Overnight, everyone lost contact with him. He didn't show up at work, at his parents' house, or at his daughter's house. Additionally, while he responded to text messages, they seemed to be written strangely. He didn't answer phone calls or send voice messages. On November 5, 2014, Maria Alejandra executed her plan with premeditation and cold blood. She waited for her husband to return home from work and gave him a glass containing a drink laced with a psychoactive drug used to treat depression and other mood disorders. The drug has sedative effects due to its composition, and it's a prescription medication that causes drowsiness and impairs movement. Once she was sure he was completely sedated, Maria Alejandra showed no mercy. She stabbed Alan in the abdomen with a sharp kitchen tool while he was defenseless, waiting for him to take his last breath. The next step was to dispose of the body. She placed it on the bedroom floor and used an electric saw to dismember his body into pieces that she could handle and store in plastic garbage bags. To facilitate transportation, she put the bags into a red suitcase. The body parts that could help identify him were placed in another bag and stored in her kitchen freezer. Once everything was in order, around 12:45 a.m., She called the security guards of the private housing estate where she lived. She asked for help to load the suitcase into her van, as recorded in the security logbook of that day. The condominium security personnel found her extremely nervous and desperate, glancing around in all directions. They asked her what was in the suitcase, and she replied that it was her father's surgical equipment and that she needed to transport it to the hospital immediately because she was very sick, and he was going to perform emergency surgery on her. During the time she was away from her residence, she scattered the bags containing the body parts in 2 different parts of the city. Upon returning home, she changed the locks on the doors and informed the residential security guard that she was going on a trip with her husband. On November 6, 2014, Mexico City police found a human torso without upper limbs. In the afternoon, they had found other human remains, including arms and legs without hands or feet, in black plastic bags. The distance between the first and second discovery sites was considerable, explaining why Maria Alejandra took so long to return to the condominium that early morning. The remains were transferred to the Institute of Forensic Sciences, where anthropologist specialists determined that they belonged to a single person. But they were unable to identify the individual at that time. To distract Alan's relatives and prevent them from notifying the police, Maria Alejandra used her husband's mobile phone to send greetings and respond to all received messages. She temporarily succeeded in ensuring that no one suspected his tragic end, buying herself time to organize a plan to appear guilt-free, just as she had done when she attacked her first husband. Alan's siblings and daughter received WhatsApp messages in which he supposedly commented that he regretted getting married and announced that he had recently started a relationship with another woman. Other contradictory messages stated that he liked being alone, and some said he was traveling. At the same time, Alberto, Maria Alejandra's father, began calling Alan's father to inquire if they knew the whereabouts of his daughter, whom he had been searching for days without any news. Later, he called Alan's parents again to inform them that he had found Maria Alejandra and that she was admitted to the National Institute of Psychiatry, seeking treatment for depression caused by Alan's supposed infidelity. He also mentioned that she had become paranoid, thinking that the police were after her, which was another reason for her hospitalization. In the midst of this web of deception, months passed, but when December came with its special connotation of family unity, Alan's relatives decided to go to his house to see him. Once again, Maria Alejandra was a step ahead. She notified them that they would not be at the location, as they had decided to take a vacation. This story did not make sense to them at all, especially after Alberto's call confirming that she was in the city and undergoing psychiatric treatment. So when the alarmed family went to the police and filed a missing person report for Alan, it only took a few days for the authorities to notice that the report matched the recently found remains. The prosecutors cross-referenced information with staff from the Center for Missing and Absent Persons. These conversations helped them progress in achieving a full identification of the victim. They compared the characteristics of the human remains with the reports of missing persons with similar physical traits. Finally, Alan's body was identified by his relatives. The officers then decided to inspect the couple's house, and upon arrival, they found Maria Alejandra. The detectives immediately took her to the police station and secured a search warrant. Once obtained, they searched the house for evidence and finally found Alan's head, feet, and hands, as well as an electric saw. The investigators found blood traces in one of the rooms and in the bathroom using luminal tests. They also noticed that the surface of the mattress and a piece of the carpet had been cut out to erase evidence of fluids. It was later determined that Maria Alejandra had used these items to support Alan's body parts. Initially, she was questioned as a witness, but fell into constant and obvious contradictions, becoming the main person of interest in the case. The investigation soon determined that she was the one sending messages from her husband's cell phone to make his family believe he was alive and not report his disappearance. Maria Alejandra claimed she knew nothing about Alan, that she had not seen him for several days, and that they barely communicated through text messages. Taking advantage of her background as a psychologist and trying to prove her innocence, she showed an admission form to a psychiatric clinic dated during the days when her husband disappeared. Initially, Maria Alejandra denied all responsibility, but Alan's body spoke for itself, and the forensic experts were able to perfectly reconstruct the events. From their analysis, the experts noted in the autopsy protocol that a wound was visible on the torso, caused by a sharp instrument that had penetrated the abdomen and was classified as lethal. With all the evidence that the authorities gathered at the couple's house, as well as at the sites where they found his remains, the investigators were able to establish Maria Alejandra's connection to her husband's cruel death. The detectives had testimonies placing her at the scene of the time of the events, and this was supported by the building's security log, which detailed the specific times she left and entered. Plus, the issue of the heavy suitcase that they helped her load into her vehicle. In addition, statements from Alan's daughter and sister revealed that the psychologist had threatened the young girl with taking her life if she opposed the relationship with her father. Although Maria Alejandra attempted to evade responsibility by admitting herself to a psychiatric center, forensic studies confirmed that she did not suffer from any mental illness. Finally cornered by the evidence, Maria Alejandra confessed to the fatal assault against her husband and admitted that she took him by surprise. However, she justified her actions by stating she was tired of the domestic violence she was experiencing. On December 10, 2014, the court issued a formal prison order for Maria Alejandra for the crime of homicide. From that moment on, information began to emerge that could implicate the woman in other fatal violent events. For instance, it was said that Maria Alejandra might have committed another serious crime against people in 2012. All this leads to suspicions that the accused might have had help from her father, who would be an accomplice in covering for her and diverting public opinion. Over the years, he allegedly stripped the man of some of his assets, according to Mexican media. Thus, there are suspicions that, in reality, the La Fuente father and daughter were highly dangerous criminals. However, justice did not establish any decisive line of investigation in this regard. After an 8-year wait, on Monday, September 5, 2022, the General Prosecutor's Office of the Capital announced the sentence. For the crimes of qualified homicide and disrespect to corpses or human remains, Maria Alejandra Lafuente Casco was sentenced to 46 years and 6 months in prison, an unprecedented punishment in modern Mexican justice. After the firm conviction, she has no right to review the sentence or to alternative measures that relieve the prison sentence. She was also ordered to pay for the damage and funeral costs, and she lost her political rights. Maria Alejandra Lafuente was a calculating woman who seems to have taken advantage of her father's influence and protection to act freely and proceed against the men who, in some way, tried to save her from punishment for the assault she committed against her first husband, using an argument that portrayed her as a mistreated lady, probably making use of her great manipulation skills. Then, just 3 years later, she acted again, this time against her second husband. Acting with incredible cold blood, she planned the bloody end and even feigned insanity to once again avoid being held responsible for her actions. But this time, she had gone too far. Nothing could save her from being harshly sentenced by justice. Shelby Von Holt was a cheerful young girl born on September 7, 2000, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, USA. Shelby was the second child in a family that included her mother, Shauna Hartman, father Tody Von Holt, older sister Peyton Hartman, and younger siblings Devin Von Holt and Isaac Von Holt. Shelby graduated from Troy Center High School in 2018. Over the next 2 years, she worked at a steakhouse and other places while contemplating her desired career path. She seemed to be leaning towards a therapeutic field, although she hadn't yet decided the exact specialty. Living life like any other 20-year-old, Shelby's cheerful personality made her the life of every party. She was ever smiling, loved to dance, sing, and spend time with friends. Interestingly, Shelby was living independently, although the reasons or circumstances for this remain unclear. Although she wasn't particularly active on most social media platforms, her presence on Facebook was notable. She frequently posted cheerful photos, many of which included moments shared with her young niece, Camila, the daughter of her older sister, Peyton. According to her mother, Shelby met another young woman named Valerie Rose Hardick on Facebook. Though Valerie, at 22, was slightly older, the two reportedly never had a close relationship. Little is known about Valerie's life, but it has been rumored that she had a troubled childhood, questionable associations, and potentially some mental health challenges. On June 20, 2021, at 6:48 p.m., a 911 dispatcher received a call from a distressed woman. She managed to convey that she was injured and said that Valerie shot her. Whether she provided her address or if the police traced the call is unclear. However, shortly after, officers from the Fort Wayne Police Department arrived at a residence where Shelby resided. Upon arriving at the scene, officers forced entry into the residence and found Shelby barely conscious, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds, surrounded by a substantial pool of blood. While one officer stayed with Shelby, the rest performed what is termed a protective sweep of the residence to ensure no other victims were present and that the assailant or assailants were not still inside. As they awaited the arrival of an ambulance and local firefighters, the officers attempted to provide first aid. A sergeant asked Shelby if she knew who had shot her. She identified Valerie as the perpetrator of the attack. Soon after, emergency medical personnel took over Shelby's primary care, rushing her to the nearby hospital. She was conscious, in critical condition, but still alive. Meanwhile, Shelby's family was informed of the incident, and Fort Wayne Police Department officers began gathering potential evidence from her home. A significant piece of this evidence was a doorbell camera. After an immediate review of its footage, a person of interest was identified, though details were not publicly disclosed at the time. A public appeal was made, urging anyone with pertinent information related to the case to contact the police department or provide details anonymously through Crime Stoppers. In a twist of fate, the day after Shelby was critically injured, a disturbing incident occurred roughly 50 kilometers away in Ohio. Around 10:30 in the morning, the local police department received several calls about a suspicious-looking young woman loitering around a convenience store situated at a gas station. Eyewitnesses claimed she had been wandering inside the store and near the gas pumps for about an hour, appearing to try and glimpse the credit card numbers customers were using for their purchases. But that wasn't all. The police county had already received a call from a man who reported the same woman seen earlier at the convenience store. He claimed she had pointed a gun at his back. Shortly after, with precautions taken, police officers arrived at the gas station where the woman was still present, and they proceeded to apprehend her without any violent incidents. The woman was identified as 22-year-old Valerie Rose Hardick. She was in possession of a 9mm handgun, which according to reports matched the weapon used in the assault on Shelby. The name Valerie was the one uttered by Shelby when identifying her attacker. To further solidify the suspicions, Valerie's car was the same one captured by Shelby's doorbell camera, seen leaving the scene moments before the injured young woman's emergency call. Despite the ongoing investigation, Valerie was booked and transferred to the county correctional facility, awaiting her arraignment in the local municipal court. Meanwhile, Shelby was desperately clinging to life. 8 9mm bullet wounds had severely injured her chest and abdomen. Doctors had placed her in an induced coma, doing everything in their power to save her. Regrettably, 3 days after the brutal attack, on June 22, 2021, Shelby's body succumbed to the injuries, and she was declared dead. According to media reports, Shauna, Shelby's mother, mentioned her daughter passed away after undergoing 4 intricate abdominal surgeries that didn't produce the hoped-for outcomes. Shelby received 20 blood transfusions, and the medical prognosis was always grim. If she had survived, doctors believed that Shelby's legs would need to be amputated. One might wonder what could drive a 22-year-old woman to murder another young woman so viciously. Based on the limited details, the only motive the investigators disclosed was jealousy. It was alleged that Shelby was dating a young man to whom Valerie had a strong attachment, although his identity was never revealed. Valerie was charged with criminal assault and aggravated threats. Initially detained in Ohio, she was set a bail of $100,000 for threatening a man at the gas station with a firearm. After the initial legal proceedings in Ohio, Valerie was transferred to Allen County to face charges for the murder of Shelby. In a private ceremony, Shelby Von Holt's remains were memorialized at a funeral home on June 29, 2021, after which they were cremated. As the judicial process for the murder unfolded at the beginning of 2022, Valerie Rose Hardick entered a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to the murder of Shelby, citing a mental illness as a defense. As part of the agreement, the prosecution dropped an aggravating charge related to the use of a firearm during the commission of the crime, which could have added an additional 20 years to her sentence. Having pleaded guilty, the sentencing hearing was the only step left. This took place in September 2022 in the Superior Court of Allen County. As agreed, Valerie entered her plea as guilty but mentally ill. During the hearing, Valerie's defense attorney tried to present mitigating circumstances. He detailed Valerie's challenging upbringing, marked by the death of her stepmother, abuse from a stepbrother, and a history of mental health issues. However, the prosecutors highlighted the trivial motive of jealousy that led Valerie to take Shelby's life. The prosecution also emphasized Valerie's criminal history, noting its escalation over time. They pointed out that when Valerie murdered Shelby, she was on probation, part of an alternative program due to previous charges. Throughout the hearing, Valerie displayed erratic behavior. At times, she appeared coherent and fully aware of the situation, while at other moments she seemed nervous, distracted, and even smiled at Shelby's family. Still, she answered the court's questions accurately. Media reports did not specify exactly what Valerie said when given the chance to speak, but they did highlight that she never showed remorse or apologized to Shelby's family. Shelby's parents, however, clearly conveyed their profound loss during their victim impact statements. Shelby's father recalled his daughter's love for significant symbols like peace signs and mentioned that at the time of her murder, she was finding her way in life. He reflected on Valerie's demeanor during her guilty plea, stating that just by hearing her voice, one could sense her lack of remorse. The grief-stricken father asserted that by admitting to intentionally killing Shelby, Valerie wore her crime like a badge of honor, which showed clear evidence of her lack of regret. Additionally, Toby stated that while jealousy was presented as Valerie's motivation for killing Shelby, he believed there had to be more to the story that wasn't revealed. Referring to the defense's argument about Valerie's mental illness, Shelby's father pointed out that prisons are filled with people with mental issues. He vowed never to stop seeking answers as to why this tragedy occurred. In a heartfelt reflection, Toby emphasized that there were 2 tragedies in this case, the first being the shocking and agonizing death of his daughter, and the second being Valerie's choice to forsake her future out of rage. He pointed out that Valerie's children would suffer greatly. It was revealed that at 22, Valerie already had at least 2 children, though no further details about them were made public. The grieving father expressed that the tragedy wouldn't end at the graveyard or in the courtroom, stating that true justice could never be found in such tragedy. However, he shared that he had forgiven Valerie to find peace within himself, feeling that his faith in Christ guided him to this decision. He expressed confidence that Shelby was with God and reiterated his deep love for her. Shauna, Shelby's mother, also shared her sentiments. She fondly remembered her daughter as a princess from the day she was born. She described Shelby as a kind spirit who wouldn't hesitate to help a friend, no matter the distance. Shauna committed to attending all possible appeal hearings that Valerie's defense might initiate in the future. Shauna shared the torment of the memory of her lifeless daughter and the helplessness she felt being unable to protect her. All she could do was lay her head on Shelby's chest as her daughter lay in a medically induced coma. She publicly acknowledged her daughter's courage, as Shelby had managed to name her assailant twice and fought valiantly for her life after being attacked. Shauna detailed Shelby's severe injuries, explaining that her heart was racing so fast that her body couldn't sustain it. Shauna mentioned she didn't seek compensation for her daughter's medical expenses, which amounted to merely $500,000, as these were waived upon Shelby's death. Funeral expenses were around $15,000, but Shauna expressed that she didn't believe she would ever receive compensation and didn't want any money from Valerie. Holding back tears, Shelby's mother expressed that memories were all she had left. She wished she could trade places with her daughter, noting that there were days when the grief was so intense that she couldn't bring herself to get up. After the presentations by the legal representatives and the victims' family statements, the court awaited the verdict from the judge. Given the plea agreement under Indiana law, the sentence could range between a minimum of 45 years to a maximum of 65 years, with the average being 55 years. Valerie's defense asked for the minimum sentence, highlighting various mitigating factors, while the prosecution sought the maximum. Before announcing his decision, the judge stated it was evident the murder was premeditated and Valerie was fully aware of her actions, which was further evident when she fled to Ohio. The judge acknowledged that Valerie might have had a challenging upbringing, facing inadequate education, personal traumas, and mental health issues. However, he emphasized her growing criminal record. At the time of Shelby's murder, Valerie was already facing pending charges for a separate crime. Given her past unsuccessful rehabilitation attempts and criminal background, her trauma couldn't be deemed a viable excuse. Reflecting on these points, the judge sentenced 23-year-old Valerie to the maximum possible sentence of 65 years in prison. He also ordered the destruction of the weapon used in the murder. According to the American Correctional System's records, Valerie is incarcerated in Indiana Women's Prison, with the earliest estimated release date being June 18, 2070, at which time she will be 72 years old. After the court session, Shelby's parents expressed satisfaction with the verdict. However, in later statements, they clarified that no judgment could alleviate their pain. While Valerie would spend her days in prison, Shelby's mother emphasized that she would forever miss and remember her daughter. Interestingly, this case is one of the few where a mortal victim was able to identify her killer. Elaborating on this aspect, a prosecutor, who was not involved in this case, explained that when a dying victim identifies their attacker, such statements are known as dying declarations. These not only provide a starting point for detectives, but also stand as the sole exception to the hearsay rule in court trials, aiming to ensure the most reliable evidence is presented. He also stressed that such dying declarations are admissible in court since they tend to produce more trustworthy statements due to the immense pressure and tragic circumstances surrounding them. Lucy Davies was born in 1971 in the county of Rhondda, England. She was the daughter of Roger and Andrea Davies, who were also the proud parents of another girl named Anna. The family was settled in a small community mainly formed by socially purposed housing. There, against the backdrop of beautiful mountain scenery, Lucy had a particularly happy childhood. Since she and her little sister had similar tastes, they were always very close. Her parents always highlighted Lucy's infectious joy as a standout quality. During her time in primary school, Lucy was known for her outgoing and likable temperament, which immediately endeared her to teachers and classmates alike. In addition to her charming personality, she was also recognized for her undeniable beauty, making her one of the most popular and admired girls at school. Regarding interests outside of academics, both she and Anna loved ponies. Knowing this, their father pleasantly surprised them by enrolling both in the local riding club. This sporting activity taught them discipline and also showcased their talent. Consequently, they earned the right to participate and represent the club in countless events and competitions. Thus, by the start of secondary school, Lucy shone as an exceptional rider. However, her energy and passion were not limited to the tracks, as the versatile young lady began to take flute and piano lessons, dedicating long hours to practice to master both instruments. Her efforts soon paid off, and by the following year, Lucy had a very comprehensive and detailed mastery of the wide field of classical music. Thanks to this, she was accepted into a youth orchestra and also joined her school's choir group. As often happens in this stage of adolescence, a healthy romantic interest appeared in her life, and Lucy became very close to Gareth Jenkins. However, she preferred to keep it a secret. In 1989, after finishing secondary school, Lucy was determined to pursue a career in the musical world. With that goal in mind, she enrolled to undertake a bachelor's degree at the University of Warwick. There, she began her new and promising life, always with the aspiration of becoming a teacher and dedicating herself to musical education. But things did not go as she had expected. While her passion remained, she did not enjoy the direction of the degree program. Consequently, she decided to switch her original plan and opted to study urban planning. It was around this time that she met Graham McAllister. They both discovered quite soon that their outlook on life was very similar. Aside from their love for art and shared interests, a crucial detail in their bond was the extravagant sense of humor that complemented each other. Their relationship flowed naturally, and as they made plans for the future, Lucy decided to introduce him to her parents. For Roger and Andrea, the meeting was wonderful, as they were certain that Graham was the right one for their daughter. So much so that they decided to buy Lucy a house in the city of Coventry, northwest of London. This gesture, in addition to ensuring her a life free from the upheavals of rent and moving, carried their wish for her to start a family. Shortly after moving in, Lucy invited her boyfriend to share the new home. As they continued with their studies in 1995, the young couple welcomed their first child, whom they named James. Lucy decided it was best to take a break from university to care for him. Meanwhile, Graham continued with his university commitments and, to support the household expenses, got a job working the night shift at the city's postal sorting office. Over the months, this dynamic began to affect Lucy, because alone at home, dedicated exclusively to the child, and with many hours away from her partner, a feeling of boredom took hold of her. Then, she found no better solution than to explore internet chat rooms for distraction. In this universe, she sought to meet new people. One night, while Lucy was immersed in lively conversations in various chat rooms, she came into contact with Harold Landry. At 53 years old and of American origin, Harold came from a financially struggling family in Louisiana. However, he understood early on that, Being just one among a dozen siblings, he would have to achieve everything through his own effort and will. Thus, from a young age, he dedicated himself to hard work to escape poverty. His opportunity arrived when he realized that in the oil business, the key was not in owning a well, but in providing the essential infrastructure for the owners of such fields. Consequently, he founded his own company, focused exclusively on the design and manufacture of hydraulic equipment for major oil companies in the southern United States. As he had anticipated, the business allowed him to amass a great fortune, eventually reaching billionaire status. By that time, he divided his time between his eccentric hobbies and a property on the island of Cozumel in Mexico. On a personal level, he had been married and divorced twice. From these unions, he had children whose exact number and identities are not publicly known. What was known, however, was that Harold made sure they lacked nothing. A particularly relevant event occurred in 1992 when, being single again, he met a married woman 20 years his junior. However, neither her family nor her husband were obstacles for Harold, who directed all his seductive strategy towards her and won her over. On February 6, 1994, Harold picked her up to take her for a ride in New Orleans. For this occasion, they hired a babysitter. After concluding the evening, Harold accompanied his lover back to her home and offered to take the babysitter back to hers. No one seemed concerned about the fact that the husband would find out about the betrayal and could act as a wounded man. In fact, that's exactly what happened. Outside the residence, the betrayed husband was monitoring every move of his wife. Once the third party said goodbye, he followed him in his car. A few minutes later, Harold finally noticed the vehicle tailing him. Then, almost as an instinctive gesture, he opened the glove compartment and pulled out the firearm he usually kept. When both stopped at a red light, things spiraled out of control, as the babysitter later narrated. Harold then brandished a revolver at the betrayed husband and fired. The bullet severed an artery in his neck and damaged a nerve leading to a vocal cord. The husband, called Chris Price, collapsed on the pavement with a wound on his neck, but fortunately, there was a hospital right in front of them, which allowed him to receive immediate aid, and the doctors were able to save his life. As for Harold, he was arrested and charged with attempted murder. The trial against him took place in 1997. In his opening statement, the defense attorney told the jury that Chris had only been the victim of a tragic and sordid affair. Regarding his client, he mentioned that he acted out of fear and in self-defense. The defense's clever strategy led the jury, consisting of 4 men and 8 women, to find Harold guilty of the lesser charge of aggravated assault. As a result, he was sentenced to 5 years behind bars. After appealing, Harold obtained probation. In exchange, he had to pay a fine of $500 and fulfill community service obligations. Although he sought to be completely exonerated, he thanked Pat for his hard work. Since then, they became great friends. Shortly after, Harold and Chris agreed on an undisclosed settlement amount. By the time Harold began talking with Lucy, he was residing in Covington and was still wealthy enough not to have to work. He was also honest about his occupations and everything related to his past life, including love affairs and legal details. But all these elements only served to increase Lucy's attraction to him. What followed was an engaging online romance, with Harold promising her a more than tempting lifestyle. His persistence and persuasive power bore fruit when Lucy finally asked Graham to end their relationship. Thus, he had the path clear, without a rival that could cause him trouble, as had happened with Chris. With the wind in his favor in the early 2000s, Harold traveled to England to meet her, and she took the opportunity to introduce him to her parents as her boyfriend. Although Roger and Andrea were surprised by the significant age difference, they respected their daughter's decisions and did not object to the relationship. Feeling fulfilled and fortunate to share his life with her, Harold spared no effort to surprise her, whether with luxurious gifts or anything else Lucy desired. In fact, by then, he was so in love that he was already planning to propose marriage. However, he didn't want it to be just any proposal. He wished to do it in an ideal setting. To achieve this goal, he took her, along with her son James, and included Graham in the group on a trip. The chosen destination was Mexico, which for Harold was by then his favorite place in the world. Additionally, his longtime friend Pat, who had been his attorney in the past trial, also had an apartment close to his residence, which added to the feeling of comfort. Initially, Harold bought a diamond ring and shared the news with enthusiasm with Pat. Nonetheless, his friend harbored certain suspicions about his future fiancée. Moreover, over the days, Pat found it strange that Lucy had dedicated a good part of her time in the company of Graham. He seemed to be completely blind to it, and ultimately, he proceeded with his plan to propose. Lucy happily accepted the proposal, and in mid-2003, the couple celebrated their union. Shortly afterward, Harold surprised her by acquiring a $1 million property in an exclusive neighborhood in Worcestershire. In this rural setting, the marriage had a prosperous and peaceful start, further favored by the presence of excellent neighbors like Rachel Clark and Stephen Kennedy, with whom Harold and Lucy formed a lovely friendship. Soon, the newlyweds had their first daughter, whom they named Harriet. The event filled both Lucy and Harold with joy, and from then on, he dedicated himself to the little girl with undiminished energy and commitment. Equally important and affectionate was the relationship he maintained with James, whom he treated as if he were his own son. But relentless time began to erode their initial bliss. Gradually, the demands made towards Lucy increased, and her moodiness became directly proportional to her husband's demands. As he saw it, his wife was to constantly adjust to his preferences and adopt a submissive role to his requests. She, on the other hand, had different expectations, so tensions quickly became apparent. As a conclusion, Lucy was direct and unafraid to express her thoughts, and in this dynamic, her husband was not willing to yield. With both having volatile personalities, their arguments often culminated in explosive breakups, followed by reconciliation once the storm had passed. Thus, moments that had once been pleasurable, like the children's vacations, became increasingly marred by fights. Meanwhile, James witnessed the disintegration of his mother and stepfather's relationship. To their neighbors' dismay, the disputes that stretched on for hours became a sort of regular soundtrack. By that time, Rachel and Stephen were aware that the couple had a tendency to abuse alcohol, knowing well that this was the fuel that ignited their shouting and complaints. When Lucy and Harold unleashed all their anger, leading to prolonged periods of not speaking to each other, their neighbors felt peace return. In mid-2009, thanks to social media, Lucy reconnected with Gareth. Having had no contact since their platonic love in secondary school, they caught up and chatted for hours, with necessary interruptions due to both of their commitments. After Harold went to sleep, his wife stayed in front of the screen. Soon, it became evident to him that, feeling unhappy, his wife had resorted to the same escape route through which she had found him, and he had no doubt she was looking for a replacement. However, far from confronting her, he considered giving her some space and traveled to Mexico, where he stayed for a while. Meanwhile, Lucy took the opportunity to invite Gareth to stay with her. In the autumn of 2009, her husband returned to England, thinking this time would resolve their marriage. But as soon as he stepped into the house, Lucy asked him for a divorce. Initially, he felt devastated. Then, after a few weeks, Harold began a relationship. He met this new woman online. She lived in the vicinity, and went by the name of Rachel. Parallel to each of their new romances, the divorce negotiations were underway, and as often happens, new conflicts emerged. Especially concerning the house, Lucy expected to keep it to ensure a roof over her children's heads. For Harold, on the other hand, this matter was non-negotiable. His solution was to offer her money to buy herself a more modest apartment on her own. At the same time, he completely excluded her from his will. Upon learning of the decisions of her still husband, Lucy flew into a rage. Her feelings of hatred towards him made her share everything about Harold's past with her son James, not leaving anything out. Amidst the complicated process and considering the evident tension she was living in, Gareth invited her to spend a few days with him in Wales. Upon her return to familiar surroundings, Lucy no longer wished to disguise or hide her lengthy phone conversations with her new love. Meanwhile, both she and Harold were immersed in excessive alcohol consumption. The arguments escalated to unexpected heights, leaving the children at the mercy of a violent and unbearable atmosphere. On the afternoon of Monday, February 1st, 2010, Harold drank several glasses of wine. At one point, he received a package intended for Stephen. Around 9 o'clock at night, when Stephen returned from work, he found a postal notification indicating that his parcel had been delivered to his neighbor. The Landry's lights were on, so he went there. Harold invited him in and served him a glass of wine. After greeting Lucy and exchanging a few words, Stephen noticed how drunk his host was. He took his package, excused himself, and left. Subsequently, the couple engaged in a nonsensical argument, specifically over a furniture purchase she was planning for their move. James acted as the years of fights had taught him. This time, the disagreement escalated to a physical altercation. In the scuffle, Harold grabbed a kitchen utensil with which he struck Lucy on the cheek. Unable to continue avoiding the facts, James appeared at the scene of the dispute and found his mother injured. He immediately called the police and then focused on securing his younger sister's safety. Not long after, Lucy and her children left the house seeking help. The first place she thought to go was to Stephen's house. However, just as she headed in that direction, Harold caught up to her and, with a knife, caused her multiple injuries. Then he left her under a bush in the garden and walked away. Alerted by the screams, Stephen went outside. It only took him a few steps to discover his neighbor. Although he initially thought she was unconscious, he quickly understood the severity of the situation. At that moment, responding to the emergency call, the police arrived at the scene. They called the paramedics and searched the vicinity for the perpetrator. However, they only found the children, hidden and terrified in the backyard amidst the darkness. Once on site, the paramedics acted as quickly as possible, and Lucy was transported to the hospital. Very shortly after, her heart stopped. Meanwhile, Harold went to Rachel's house and confessed that something terrible had happened, but without giving further details. He then gave her 3 bank drafts totaling $40,000, a sum of cash, the keys to his car, and several signed blank checks. Then he set off back home. By that time, several police patrols were trying to locate him. Eventually, they found him walking along the road and proceeded to arrest him. Roger and Andrea were overwhelmed with despair upon hearing the tragic news. In a statement shared by the police, they asked for respect during their time of unimaginable sorrow from losing their daughter. For now, they had nothing more to say to the media. From then on, all their attention was focused on looking after their grandchildren. The forensic examination confirmed that Lucy had died as a result of multiple stab wounds to the chest. With this evidence and having James as a first-hand witness on February 5, 2010, Harold appeared before the court and was charged with murder. The trial took place in early February 2011. It was presided over by Judge David Foskett. On this occasion, Pat was not the defender of his friend. That task fell to attorney Andy Childs. Despite the evident difficulty of his task, the defense attorney argued that his client had been provoked by the fury of his wife, who left him no alternative but to act as he did. During his initial statements from the stand, Harold, amidst sobs, stated that he loved Lucy and regretted his actions. He then adhered to the strategy laid out by his lawyer, admitting to involuntary manslaughter because, in his words, Lucy had pushed him to the limit. To highlight the violence of the case, the prosecution presented a very detailed animation of the multiple injuries suffered by the victim. This presentation was shocking to those present in the courtroom. Finally, on February 24, 2011, after less than 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Harold Landry guilty of the murder of his wife, Lucy Landry, who was 38 years old at the time of her death, while Harold was 64. The following day was for the judge to impose the sentence. He had harsh words for Harold, whose attack he described as indescribable and unforgivable. He also dismissed Harold's claims of possible provocation by Lucy, considering them a vain attempt by the defendant to save himself. Consequently, he was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 16 years before being eligible for parole. By that time, however, he would be over 80 years old. Lucy's loved ones thanked not only for the resolution, but also for the judge's remarks, which they felt almost perfectly expressed what they themselves felt. They noted that the sentence somehow helped alleviate the pain of their loss, although they also admitted that no number of years in prison for Harold would bring back Lucy's life, so they would have to work on accepting this painful reality. For his part, Harold insisted on proclaiming his innocence, as he was heard saying he hoped to be able to appeal the sentence in the future. Nicola Edgington was a woman deemed as exceptionally dangerous after she assaulted 2 people with a knife. She had previously killed her own mother and was living freely in the community when she committed these chilling new attacks. The day turned nightmarish when Edgington, after taking a bus, randomly targeted 2 individuals on their way to work. Clark, an artist, narrowly escaped death by catching the knife's blade and fending Edgington off. But the horror didn't end there. Edgington, undeterred, struck Hodkin, a law firm accounts clerk, with such force that she almost decapitated her. Nicola Edgington was born in Britain on September 9, 1980, the eldest of 3 children to Marion and Harry Edgington. Her younger siblings are Tom, 2 years her junior, and Sarah, who was 5 years younger. Not much is known about Nicola's early years, except that her father Harry was a respected foreign correspondent for the British newspaper Daily Mail and often worked from home. Her mother Marion was known for her warm and outgoing personality, making her quite popular in their community. But her brother Tom says Nicola was always quite the troublemaker. He described her as a challenging child whose unruly and confrontational behavior often caused family turmoil and strained her parents' relationship. Eventually, her parents separated. Harry moved to France but stayed in touch with the children. Nicola's troubles weren't confined to home. She was also a constant source of conflict at school. As a result, other parents didn't want their children associating with her, viewing her as a bad influence. At home, Nicola frequently clashed with her mother, who took her to psychologists multiple times, trying to find a reason for her inappropriate behavior. Despite these visits, the professionals always concluded that Nicola was perfectly normal. Her brother later remarked that Nicola was good at pretending to be sane. Nicola's behavior became even more challenging during her preteen years. By the age of 11, she had become completely uncontrollable and would disappear from home for days at a time. In one instance, driven to desperation by her constant escapades, her mother Marion hid all her shoes. Unperturbed, Nicola simply took a pair of her brother's shoes and left anyway. Marian frequently had to call the police to locate her daughter Nicola. It's not clear whether she truly needed assistance or was just causing trouble, but Nicola did once call social services to be moved to a care facility, accusing her mother of improper conduct. Her call led to her being taken away for her safety, but she was sent back home after a few weeks because she was seen as a threat to other children at the facility. Later, Marian sold their home and moved to a remote cabin in East Sussex, hoping for anonymity and a fresh start. She was trying to keep her 12-year-old daughter away from bad influences, including friends with whom Nicola had started drinking, smoking, and staying out late. In this new place, Nicola was enrolled in a local school, while her siblings were sent to a boarding school. This move, Marian hoped, would allow her to better manage Nicola and keep the younger children safe. Tom, her brother, later expressed his satisfaction with the boarding school, enjoying the company of peers from stable families and dreading weekends at home due to Nicola's disruptive influence. Meanwhile, Marian continued struggling with Nicola, who left school for good at 15, escalating tensions and even violence at home, once assaulting her mother with a home telephone, leading to police intervention and warnings against such behavior. Nicola eventually moved out of the family home into an apartment in Brighton, arranged by her father. At 17, Nicola fell pregnant and was expecting twins, but the pregnancy was tragically cut short by a violent act from her boyfriend. 2 years later, she got pregnant again by a drug dealer. This baby was born prematurely, but survived. Nicola returned home and her mother helped care for the fragile newborn. Then Nicola began working various jobs, including as a receptionist, salesperson, and pole dancer in nightclubs, where she often used drugs and experienced 2 overdoses. She met her future husband in a club with whom she had her second child. His identity remains undisclosed, but according to Tom, this marriage brought stability to Nicola's life, as her Jamaican husband cherished both children and ensured Nicola took her prescribed medication for behavioral management. However, the stability was short-lived as Nicola stopped her medication, joining an evangelical church, believing faith rather than medicine could control her behavior. Unfortunately, this did not lead to the hoped-for miracle. Instead, Nicola developed a religious delusion, convinced she was surrounded by demons. Apparently, due to immigration issues, Nicola's husband had to return to Jamaica, taking both children with him. However, Nicola later followed him, not exactly to reunite the family. She went to Jamaica and then back to her own country, taking her first child with her, even against her husband's wishes. He was very worried about her mental state. Upon her return to Britain, Nicola's situation didn't get any better, and Marian was deeply concerned for the little one's safety because Nicola was having violent and unstable episodes. Living in constant stress from her daughter's outbursts and fearing for her grandson's safety, Marian made a tough decision to protect him. So, when the boy was 5 years old, she entrusted him to social services, and he eventually ended up living in Jamaica with his stepfather. Nicola, who previously had a council-funded apartment because of her children, lost this benefit when they were no longer with her. She had to move back in with her mother, who, despite being scared of her, couldn't leave her daughter homeless. For Marian, the troubles only seemed to increase. Her relationship with Nicola remained fraught, and Nicola's violent behavior continued. Things escalated to the point where, in 2005, Nicola received a legal warning for causing damage to a neighbor's property, where she also allegedly threatened someone with a knife. At that time, a psychiatrist evaluated her and claimed there was no evidence of mental illness, but it wouldn't be long before events suggested otherwise. On November 4th, 2005, Tom and Sarah visited their mother, marking the first time in a long while that the three siblings were together at their maternal home. It was an awkward reunion, so to lighten the mood, Tom invited Nicola to a pub. This move also allowed Sarah to have some peaceful time with their mother. At the first pub, Tom tried to lighten the mood with jokes, but Nicola seemed distracted, focusing on writing in a notebook. They then moved to another venue, where Tom felt relieved as Nicola became more talkative, even mentioning her plans to move back to Jamaica. However, this calm was short-lived, as Nicola was soon thrown out for starting a fight with the owner of the venue. Tom chose to stay and called his mother and sister to join him, and they agreed. However, when they arrived, Marion couldn't find parking, so she dropped Sarah off at the venue and returned home. After a while, Tom and Sarah also decided to head back to their mother's house. Upon entering, Tom immediately noticed something about the guest room's foldable bed. Tom couldn't fully grasp what he was seeing at first. It looked like a pile of clothes with two legs sticking out. He thought maybe Marion had invited someone over to stay. Still uncertain about what he was seeing, he called for his sister. Sarah, less cautious, strode into the room and immediately started screaming at Tom not to enter and to urgently call the police. The legs Tom had seen belonged to their 60-year-old mother, Marion, who was lifeless and had several stab wounds. Nicola was nowhere to be found, but for the siblings it was clear she was responsible for their mother's tragic end. Later, Tom found a notebook in the house with a list titled "Condemned People," written by Nicola. At the top of the list was their mother Marion's name, crossed out with Tom's name below it. Though no official source was mentioned, some media reported that the argument between mother and daughter might have started over Nicola's accusation that Marion had estranged her from her son and allegedly removed her from the will. When the authorities arrived at the family home, investigators began collecting evidence while forensic personnel took care of Marion's body, which had 9 stab and puncture wounds inflicted with a kitchen utensil. Meanwhile, the police launched a search for Nicola, who was not at the house. Sarah made several TV appearances, pleading for Nicola to turn herself in. Almost 13 weeks later, on November 21, 2005, Nicola was located on a public transport unit in London. Upon her arrest, she immediately blamed Tom for the fatal attack on their mother. Nicola was then subjected to a psychiatric evaluation at the station, where specialists declared her to be in an actively psychotic state. Subsequently, she was initially taken to prison and later, in February 2006, transferred to a facility for individuals who had committed crimes and suffered from mental health issues. Upon her arrival, specialists deemed Nicola unfit to stand trial, putting the legal proceedings on hold until a new professional assessment could determine her ability to understand her situation and actively participate in the judicial process. This milestone was reached in October 2006 when Nicola faced trial for her mother's death. She pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The psychiatric report presented at the trial stated that at the time of the incident, she was suffering from an acute psychotic episode, compounded by her pre-existing and persistent emotionally unstable personality traits. The mental health expert attending her recommended a prolonged stay in a secure hospital for further risk assessment and long-term rehabilitation. The judge of the case sentenced Nicola to an indefinite detention in psychiatric care at the Braxton Center. Following this decision, her siblings, Tom and Sarah, expressed relief that Nicola was finally in a place where she could not harm anyone else and receive the desperately needed help. From then on, Nicola would be treated with antipsychotic and mood-stabilizing medication. During this time, Nicola disclosed that her father had abused her in early childhood, a claim that was never confirmed and always denied by Harry. Nonetheless, Nicola consistently raised concerns among the staff attending to her. She exhibited disruptive, abusive, and rude behavior, staunchly refusing to acknowledge the crime she committed against her mother. She was obsessed with progressing quickly through treatment with the sole aim of being discharged, causing numerous challenges for the medical staff managing her case. The staff responsible for Nicola were constantly on high alert due to her interactions with male patients at the mental health center. Despite concerns, by mid-2007, Nicola was allowed supervised outings, which only raised alarms due to her deemed inappropriate behavior in the community. In November 2007, Nicola was moved within the facility to a unit allowing more independent living, not because of improved condition, but to free up a bed. In her new setting, Nicola's behavior continued to worry staff as she started a new relationship with another male patient, and her mood fluctuated with medication adjustments. Yet, on September 29, 2009, 3 years after being incarcerated for the heinous crime against her mother, controversial decisions were made about her care. After meetings, Nicola was conditionally discharged to a subsidized apartment. Nicola expressed concern about being alone at night in the new place, but the assessment team felt 24-hour supervision was unnecessary, devising a contingency plan for emergency assistance. For 2 years, she lived in a facility designed to help adults with mental health issues live independently. With just an intercom system for security, Nicola shared the residence with 3 other tenants in separate apartments. During this time, Nicola received regular visits from her psychiatrist and social worker, along with clinic appointments. She was permitted to visit her children and husband in Jamaica twice, where her husband noted her aggressive behavior, which she denied. By 2011, at 31, Nicola planned to leave the facility, with supervisors believing she needed minimal support. However, the reality was different. Nicola was out of control, having relationships with at least 2 men, one being a co-resident, breaching the house rules and showing her disregard for regulations. In March 2011, suspecting she was pregnant by one of these men, Nicola's psychiatrist advised stopping her mood-stabilizing medication for the baby's sake. After a miscarriage, she did not resume her antipsychotic medication. Around the same time, Nicola claimed to have received abusive messages from a gym employee she might have had a relationship with. Records vary, but between September and October 2011, Nicola messaged her brother Tom via a social network, seeking help and mentioning her miscarriage, missing their mother, and lamenting that no one cared for her like Marion did. She ended her message with, "I love you," giving Tom her phone number, urging him to keep their conversation from their father. Tom's response was harsh. He reminded her of the crime she committed against their mother and expressed relief over her miscarriage, suggesting that people like her should be sterilized. He concluded by telling her to end her own life. Following this, Tom contacted Nicola's mental health team, requesting a reassessment, though it is unclear if this was acted upon. After receiving Tom's harsh response, Nicola appeared to be in crisis, contacting the police multiple times and even showing up at their station in person. Each time, she told a different story. Once she claimed someone was threatening her life. Another time, she alleged that 2 drug addicts had invaded her apartment and refused to leave, possibly stealing from her. Initially, the police responded but found no evidence of her claims and gradually paid less attention to her reports. Nicola couldn't seek help from her support worker because it was closed on weekends. She turned again to the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God, a controversial institution she had attended before attacking her mother, but this didn't seem to provide the support she needed. Things took a more dramatic and dark turn on Monday, October 10th, 2011. Early at 3 a.m., Nicola took a taxi and asked to be taken to hospital. Upon arrival, she claimed the hospital was closed and decided to leave, even though the taxi driver saw that the hospital was open. He noticed Nicola had her head down and was drooling. The driver took her back to the taxi service office, where an argument ensued over Nicola's inability to pay the fare. She was trembling and distressed, repeatedly stating she needed to be admitted. Around 4:30 a.m., the police were called, and a patrol picked her up from the taxi service office and took her to Queen Elizabeth Hospital. There, Nicola said she didn't feel safe and wanted to leave. The officers got her inside before leaving the scene. Nicola tried to call her community psychiatric nurse, who was off sick, and texted her social worker to confirm a scheduled meeting for that day. She also attempted to contact the Braxton Center without success. Shortly after, Nicola asked the Queen Elizabeth receptionist if she needed to kill someone to get attention and mentioned she was hearing voices. The receptionist asked for her patience. Nicola then called the emergency number, stating she felt like she did when she had previously killed someone. The dispatcher promised to send officers, but the police decided not to go. Nicola called the emergency line again 20 minutes later, claiming she was a criminal and wanted to be arrested before she hurt someone. The police deemed it unnecessary to respond. Nicola made 2 more emergency calls, repeating that she was a dangerous schizophrenic and felt like she did when she killed her mother. The police didn't go, opting to call the hospital instead, where staff assured them Nicola was under control. At 5:30 a.m., a mental health nurse assessed her. Nicola said she hadn't slept for weeks and needed to be admitted. The nurse told her to wait for some paperwork. An hour later, security escorted Nicola to the psychiatric unit of the hospital. At 6:40 a.m., a psychiatrist greeted her, but it seemed to be a shift change, and she wasn't immediately assessed. Just after 7 a.m., Nicola pushed through a supposedly secure but faulty door and left the hospital undetected. Shortly after Nicola's escape, the doctor noticed her absence and alerted the police, who then conducted a background check and realized Nicola had a psychiatric history and had been convicted for the murder of her mother. By then, it was too late. Nicola was already out of control. Security cameras later traced Nicola's movements. She took 2 buses and arrived in the city center at 8:25 a.m. She then went to a supermarket where she either bought or stole a large 30-centimeter kitchen knife. The store's cameras captured her heading towards the women's restroom with the knife in a bag and later leaving without the bag, having concealed the knife in her clothing. At 8:29 a.m., at a bus stop, Nicola encountered 22-year-old Carrie Clark, who was listening to music and rolling a cigarette. Nicola suddenly attacked her, screaming and stabbing with the hidden knife. Carrie managed to grab the knife blade with her hands, preventing it from reaching her chest, and kicked Nicola away, questioning her sanity. Nicola oddly claimed she wasn't crazy and demanded her weapon back, which Carrie refused, leading Nicola to walk away. This, however, wasn't the end. As witnesses rushed to aid Carrie, who had severe cuts on her hands, Nicola entered a butcher's shop and stole another knife. She then approached another bus stop where 58-year-old Sally Hodkin was waiting. Without warning, Nicola savagely attacked Sally, targeting her neck and fatally wounding her. Nicola then fled the scene. Security footage showed her running away and entering a store to hide. The situation, already dire, could have worsened, but police were already in the area due to the first attack. A man seen following Nicola in the footage directed the officers to her hiding spot. By 9:40 a.m., police had apprehended Nicola behind the store. She was calm during the arrest and didn't resist. Nicola was taken back to the psychiatric hospital to manage her crisis, and it was clear she would need significant time before being fit to stand trial for these crimes. While investigators processed the crime scenes and handled Sally's body, the shocking news of the attack spread, causing public dismay at the violence against innocent people. Sally, described as a devoted mother and loving grandmother awaiting 2 more grandchildren, would tragically never meet them. The legal proceedings to determine Nicola's fate started to move forward by the end of 2012 and into 2013, with her pleading not guilty to murder and attempted murder charges. The prosecution argued that Nicola suffered from a borderline personality disorder and had acted deliberately on that tragic day. In contrast, the defense claimed she was schizophrenic and had diminished responsibility due to her mental health issues. During the trial, the jury and attendees heard from Carrie Clark, who detailed the harrowing experience of Nicola's attack, describing the physical and mental scars it left, including the loss of her sense of safety in public. The prosecution also presented the gruesome details of Sally's murder, highlighting the severity of the neck wounds that led to her almost instant death. Testimonies included the senior medical officer at the mental health unit at the time, who recounted contacting the police immediately after Nicola's escape to ensure her swift return to the hospital, despite not initially perceiving her as an emergency threat. Nursing staff admitted that Nicola escaped through a faulty door supposed to be locked, contradicting their initial statements that they tried to prevent her escape, a claim disproved by security footage. A forensic psychiatrist testified for the prosecution, challenging the diagnosis of Nicola's mental condition, asserting her actions were deliberate and not of someone unaware of their actions. The defense maintained Nicola's mental unaccountability, recounting her late 2011 religious delusions, including her involvement with a non-traditional church linked to the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God, known for exorcism rumors. Nicola reportedly believed in a demon guarding God's throne, represented on earth by the police, and had apocalyptic visions excluding her from salvation. The defense argued that Nicola's paranoid schizophrenia and other mental health issues meant she had diminished responsibility at the time of the attacks. After hearing from all parties and witnesses and examining the documentary evidence, the jury retired to deliberate in early February 2013. They returned after 5 hours and 24 minutes, finding Nicola guilty of the charges against her. Following the verdict, Sally's family, who had stoically endured hearing about the brutal attack that led to her death during the trial, released a statement honoring Sally and questioning why Nicola had been released so soon after killing her own mother. They described Sally as a loving, attentive person, a fantastic mother and grandmother, and an unparalleled friend. They expressed their daily remembrance of her and the deep miss felt by everyone who knew her, asserting that Nicola should never be released to ensure public safety. The guilty verdict meant Nicola faced a life sentence, with the judge's decision pending on the minimum term before parole eligibility. In March, the judge determined Nicola must serve at least 37 years in prison, meaning she would be nearly 70 years old before potential release. Describing Nicola as manipulative and exceptionally dangerous, the judge emphasized her responsibility for the heinous acts committed. Tom, Nicola's brother, also publicly criticized her quick release after killing their mother, expressing disbelief over her freedom to harm again and stressing the need to prevent such occurrences. He empathized with the victims, noting the trauma of losing their mother and suggesting greater agony for Sally's family, given the preventability of the crime. Tom disclosed that their mother had feared Nicola might end her life, yet felt responsible for her care. Following the tragic events, detailed case analyses concluded the entire system bore responsibility for the tragedy. The police failure to conduct appropriate checks on Nicola on the day of the incident, stating that a simple online system review would have revealed her dangerousness, given her prior conviction for murdering her mother. In November 2013, the Court of Appeal dismissed an attempt by Nicola's lawyers to overturn her sentence. Subsequent official investigations and an independent report concluded that Nicola's deadly actions resulted from a series of health and security service failures. Notably, the only reported penalties were the firings of nurses who initially lied about trying to prevent Nicola's escape from the psychiatric area. Interestingly, in September 2023, Nicola's case was sent back to the appeals court, prompted by concerns that jurors might have been misled about her mental health.